Chapter 1. 2020 Eddie Mount Everest. There was a tearing roar in the distance. A huge layer of ice slid down from the dark mountain peak and fell into the surging sea. The violent ice sea surged, surging for thousands of feet as if it would continue to the end of the world. Then a wind blew from the end of the world, mixed with the smell of ashes and dust. The world suddenly became so narrow. The towering sky seemed to be pressing down, turning into pure white iron. Through the huge cracks above, one could see the gradually dimming stars in the universe. They were like lamps that had melted into the darkness after losing power. There seemed to be nothing left in the vast world. In the end, only the highest narrow platform in the world and the temporary work cabin were left. A fishing rod was set up from the edge of the platform, and the fishing line was thrown into the sea. The buoy bobbed in the turbid water. The bored fisherman wore a felt hat and lay on his folding chair. As if to kill time, he even brought an old chessboard, ignoring the loud cracking sounds in the distance, and casually played with the chess pieces on it. As if a long time had passed, the chess pieces of the black and white sides were difficult to gather. The only remaining king and bishop were also incomplete and full of cracks under the weathering of time. Even the chessboard was missing a large corner. The black and white squares were twisted and mixed together, forming a large patch of chaotic gray. However, what was surprising was that no matter how much the ground shook, those chess pieces still stood firmly on their own territory without the slightest movement. President NASA sent a message. An assistant wearing thick glasses walked out of the cabin, carrying the last of the luggage. The fourth settlement has been completed. The New York Stock Exchange has finished uploading. They are leaving and wish us success. They should have left long ago. The president shook his head unhappily. Those guys in the Directorate of Command are so troublesome. They're always dawdling and can't even move fast. We have to keep a backup. After heaven fell, we can only rely on hard drives to transfer data. Don't be silly, child. The president snorted. Those guys just like to enjoy the feeling of stepping on the bell, as if they are professional punctuality. Tisk, 10 minutes early won't kill anyone. Ahaha. The assistant smiled awkwardly and didn't say anything else. When he moved closer, he saw the computer beside the chessboard. Apart from the 2 pages of how to fish in the Himalayas, there was only a real-time satellite image on the screen. The satellite from the old NASA was still tenaciously maintaining its mission. It meticulously transmitted the images from space back to Earth. Unfortunately, what appeared on the screen was no longer the beautiful stars of the past. Instead, it was riddled with holes. Countless chaotic cyclones covered the entire azure sky. Beneath the thick and thin layers of typhoon clouds were patches of horrifying burns. At the same time, a huge crack slowly appeared on the defensive star map. A line of crimson spread over thousands of kilometers and rapidly expanded, pulling at the surrounding yellowed continents and dark gray oceans, before stirring up a hurricane and tearing another hole in the atmosphere. Is that an earthquake? The assistant sighed in amazement and leaned over. Amazing. I didn't expect it to be so spectacular. The president looked up and immediately understood. It's a geothermal eruption. After the core began to cool, the third wave of earthquakes is being released from the continental plates of North America and South America. If left alone, it will end in about 60 years. Look, New York has sunk into the sea. What a pity, I haven't seen the Statue of Liberty yet. I've been there. The president retracted his gaze. Actually, it's not that interesting. There was a sudden roar in the distance, and something seemed to light up in the depths of the ocean. The crimson light tumbled in the darkness, reflecting the painful burning light under the Earth's crust. A faint wind blew from the end of the sea, wrapped in gray dust and white fog, as if covering the entire world. It was as if the whole world was boiling with seawater. It's really like teppanyaki, the president suddenly said. Teppanyaki. Didn't I take you to eat it last time? It's delicious. The president seemed to be sleepy. He lay on the chair and covered his face with his hat, as if he was about to sleep. His voice was soft as if he was sleep-talking. In the past, a friend in Ingzhou told me that teppanyaki is actually divided into two types, kindong and kanchi. Most people usually eat the kindong type, which is convenient and simple, but the kanchi type is the most delicious. This is because they only apply a thin layer of oil on the iron plate at the beginning. As long as the temperature is high enough, the oil of the ingredients will cook themselves. It is said that this is the only way to taste the natural freshness and taste of the ingredients. The assistant was silent for a moment. That sounds cruel. Yes, but aren't humans such cruel creatures? The president asked back. If eating is the only way to survive, then eating is the simplest reason. It's the evil that is rooted in human nature. In the beginning, they devoured thunder and fire, burned the wilderness, dug coal mines, and then extracted oil. When there was insufficient oil, they coveted fission. Since then, even if the world is about to die, they will not relent. Long before our ancestors put the Neanderthals into their diet, they were already out of control. The assistant turned around and looked at the man on the recliner, but he couldn't see the man's face through the hat. He couldn't tell if the man's eyes were filled with compassion or the mockery and ridicule he was familiar with. In a long silence, the sky grew darker and darker. The originally pure, white sky gradually turned gloomy. Finally, the halo of light behind the clouds gradually shrank and dissipated. Is the sun about to go out? Yes. The power of the source pillar is beginning to retract. The storm is brewing again. Yes. Will it stop this time? Who knows? The president slowly got up and put the hat back on his head. No matter how much it changes, this is no longer a place where humans can live. Haven't you seen it already? Apart from the pain, it has nothing left. He paused for a moment and whispered softly, "This is our last dinner." The last cigarette was lit. The flame flickered and a line of green smoke curled up. On the computer screen, all the signals representing the satellites gradually extinguished and were replaced by strange emblems one after another. They operated on the dark screen as if the gods were operating on the surface of their own abyss with indescribable coldness and majesty. Utopia, online. Continuation Academy, online. Command Bureau, online. Stoneware Society, Hand of Bronze, Cemetery of the Returnless, through the black screen and their emblems, it seemed that countless gazes were cast on this last piece of land, welcoming the arrival of the final moment. All the guests had taken their seats and were waiting for the final curtain to be lifted. He stared at the broken chessboard. The assistant swallowed nervously and carefully looked at the pocket watch in his hand. At the moment when the needle and minute hand overlapped, he looked up as if he had been electrocuted and reported, "The pillar of the spirit's marrow has been preheated." Wait. The president suddenly frowned and seemed to be listening attentively. Not only the assistant, but the emblems on the screen also seemed to be serious, as if they were facing a great enemy. Then, the guy suddenly stretched out his hand and pulled the fishing rod out. He actually pulled something out of the sea. It looked furry like a cat, but it had a fish-like tail. It was indescribably strange. After waiting for 2 hours, there's still a result. Who said that the Chindu Encyclopedia is unreliable? The president beamed and looked at his harvest. What fate, little thing, but it doesn't look like a fish. Can it be eaten? Everyone was silent and didn't speak. They didn't want to talk to him. Being pulled up by the fishing rod, the little thing opened its mouth and cried out twice unhappily. It stretched out its 2 small front claws and wanted to scratch his face, but he casually stuffed it into the fish basket. After returning to the sea, it settled down, turned over, and was too lazy to move. Okay. The president stuffed the fishing rod and bucket into the assistant's arms and picked up his chair. Get ready to go. He reached out and took the white chariot from the chessboard. Accompanied by his action, it was as if the last light went out. The sun hanging high in the sky disappeared without a trace. Everything in the world fell into darkness. After the light disappeared, no wind could be heard, because apart from them, everything stopped abruptly as if time had frozen. The first to leave was the universe, because a slender hand came out of nowhere and plucked the Black Queen. The Utopia had extracted the foundation of the stars. So the original darkness faded and countless stars disappeared, leaving only a meaningless void. Next was the remaining ocean. The continuation court removed the proof of existence, and the Black Bishop disappeared without a trace. Whether it was the monstrous tsunami or the boiling crimson sea, all the flowing water in the world was rapidly declining and collapsing. In the end, only a dark seabed was left. Then, the white bishop melted like an illusion, and the Directorate of Governance turned off the glorious light. So, everything was quiet. The rumbling crust fell into silence, and the lava spewing out of the cracks quickly solidified, losing all heat. Now in Asia, Europe, Africa, South America, North America, the barren land, the tyrannical ocean, the cold or hot hurricane, or the sky, everything was being destroyed in an orderly manner. Only the low wail of the world's collapse was left, like the strings of a piano being broken one by one. In the end, only a hollow echo was left. In this vast and lonely destruction, the old Gaia Earth 8 ushered in its own end. When the last cigarette was smoked, only the final outline of this world, which was riddled with holes, was left, and the last door that had not been closed beside the president. The 14th abandoned Eden and the promised land. The president quietly stared at the empty chessboard in front of him and took out a bouquet of pure white flowers from his arms. The petals of the flowers were still dewy. Like tears, they dripped into the cracks of the chessboard. Thank you for your shelter and patience for more than 300 years. It's been hard on you. He took off his hat and said a gentle farewell. One day, let's meet again in another hell. Finally, the door closed. In the eternal darkness and silence, space that no longer held any meaning contracted inwards, pulling the spectrum that was struggling at death's door as it began a futile redshift. As the four fundamental forces crumbled, the chessboard and the flower vanished into nothingness. The annihilation of Earth 8 was complete. The 14th plan of the International Astronomical Association was completed. At the last moment, a glimmer of light appeared on the chessboard, outlining the pure white outline of the queen in the tears of the flowers. Like a meteor, it flew into the distance. The old world died once again, just like countless times in the past. Then a new world arrived. Everything operated as usual. This was the remnant record of 90 years ago, the last remnant of the glorious era. Since then, there was no such glory. Chapter 2. Name. Why sure. 8. 17. 17. The interviewer raised his eyebrows and looked at the young man in front of the table. The thin young man who was carrying the heavy violin case quickly showed a fawning smile. He was wearing a rather old suit, and his face was rather pale, like he had not seen the sun for a long time. His hair was slightly messy, but his pair of dark eyes seemed to be illuminated by candles. They were so bright that it was scary. Gothic style? That's rare. Quite a number of people these days are interested in that style. The man in charge of the interview mumbled inexplicably. He scrutinized the young man and said in a serious tone, "Xiao Huai, you have to know that our club is an elite club. Not just any Tom, Dick, or Harry can join us. Elite. I understand." Huaisher straightened his small body and nodded heavily. "Before I came here, Lao Yang told me that your club has strict requirements. Don't worry, I have plenty of experience." Then he squeezed out a smile that could be called flattery. Even though the requirements were strict, the pay was high. Recently, many people in Xian High had lost their jobs. God knew how difficult it was for a poor student to find a part-time job playing the violin. Huaisher was so poor that he was about to die. When he heard from the intermediary, Lao Yang, that he had found a lucrative job for him, he was so happy that he almost went crazy. If he really let this job slip through his fingers, he would be struck by lightning. Before he came, he heard from Lao Yang that this was a members-only club for the rich. Just the waiters and waitresses could get a few thousand RMB in tips. If he could play the violin here, he would definitely be able to earn some money. As if surprised by his inexplicable sincerity, the interviewer was also taken aback. He nodded slightly. "Okay, the interview form says that you know how to play the cello. Perform one. Don't be too bad. Don't worry about that. Huaisher confidently sat down and opened the zither case. He hugged the cello and picked up the bow. After thinking for a moment, the unique, low melody of the cello flowed out from the strings. He might be afraid of other things, but when it came to the cello, he had never been afraid. He had received so many awards since he was young. If it weren't for the fact that he couldn't afford to hire a famous teacher, he might have already made an appearance at an international competition. This was a song that had been practiced countless times. Even if it was placed in front of a professional judge, they wouldn't be able to pick out any mistakes. Once he started to play the zither, his mood immediately calmed down, and his performance was even better than usual. The deep melancholy between the lively notes was simply on the verge of bursting out. After a few minutes, the interviewer waved his hand in annoyance. "All right, let's stop here." Huaisher raised his head in shock. He didn't know what he had done wrong. He quickly opened his backpack and said, "I still have my professional certificate, level 8 king. If it's not enough, I still have to take the primary professional exam next month." "All right, don't do those fancy things." The interviewer shook his head impatiently. "We don't care about academic qualifications here. If you can play the zither well, it's fine as long as you have a gimmick. It mainly depends on your ability." As he said this, he bent down and took out a few things from the drawer. He placed them in a row on the table and pointed at them. "Which one do you know?" "What?" Huaisher was dumbfounded. He looked at the few things on the table and was confused. What kind of instrument is this?" "Hey, I say, do you even know how to play? Didn't you say that you have a lot of experience?" The interviewer unhappily pointed at the steel wire ball, iron nail, gas spray can, and walnut clamp on the table. "Rich woman's happy ball, rich woman's happy nail, rich woman's happy flame, rich woman's happy clamp. Which one do you know?" Huaisher pondered for a long time. He looked at the cello in his arms and asked with a last glimmer of hope, "Rich woman's happy. Cello? Boss, do you have a golden finger? Or in your jargon, rich woman's happy finger? So you don't know anything?" The interviewer was furious. He pointed at his nose and scolded. "Do you know how busy I am with work? You don't know anything and you came here to be a gigolo? I turned down several appointments to come here for the interview. Isn't this a waste of my time? Don't you hire musicians in the restaurant?" It wasn't until now that the dumbfounded Huaisher realized that he seemed to have been cheated by the stupid intermediary again. Why did he say again? Wait a minute. He raised his hand seriously. "Sir, I sell my skills, not my body." Bang! The office door closed behind him. Huaisher, who had been driven out of the office, sat on a chair in the corridor. He was scared to death. He felt that he was only one step away from losing half of his virginity. But after looking at his balance, he couldn't help but want to take that step. He had sold his skills for so many years. Was he short of selling his body? Anyway, it was the same when the lights were turned off. In the end, he still felt good. As long as he gave the money, it didn't seem unacceptable. Just as he pinched his chin and pondered, a pile of Rich Woman's Happy Series products popped up in his mind. He suddenly shivered all over. At this moment, Huaisher deeply realized that happiness in this world was conserved. It meant that if the rich woman was too happy, he might not be able to be happy for the rest of his life. Forget it. He refused the temptation of money with tears in his eyes. He walked out of the club and looked back 3 times with each step. Looking at the golden stone lion at the door, he couldn't help but want to go back. Wait! Suddenly, someone called him from behind. It was a man in a suit. His face was handsome and cold, and his eyes were full of harshness. "Hey, you! Stop!" "Me?" Huaisher was a little flustered. He couldn't help but lean back a little under the man's gaze. "You're the newcomer today? You didn't even greet the big brother of the club before leaving. Don't you know the rules?" The man walked in front of him, stood on the steps, and looked at him condescendingly. He nodded. "Your face is not bad, but you'd better behave. In terms of beauty, you can't compare to me." As he spoke, he coquettishly raised his hand to comb a few strands of his long blonde hair, which made Huaisher feel sick of it. She replied angrily, "Sorry, big brother, I don't want to be a gigolo." "Oh, now you're called a male escort. It's all the same." The big brother nodded and generously waved his hand. "It's okay. Since you call me big brother, Then I'll take care of you in the future." With that, he took out a bottle from his handbag and stuffed it into Huaishi's arms. He patted his shoulder earnestly. "You have to be professional even if you're a gigolo. When you go back, wash the oil off my face. Your skincare is too rough. It's a pity for your small face. Use it sparingly. This is a high-end product from Europe." With that, he didn't wait for Huaishi to thank him. He lifted his chin and turned to leave. Huaishi stood at the door, dumbfounded. He looked down at the cosmetics in his hand. He didn't know if he should throw this thing at the door and shout something like, 30 years on the surface, 30 years at the bottom of the river. Don't bully a poor young man. After a long time, he looked at the delicate little bottle and stuffed it into his arms with a toothache. Forget it. It's already here, and it looks quite expensive. It's a pity to throw it away. I haven't opened it yet. I'll ask Lao Yang to sell it later. Poverty makes me humble. Why am I so poor when I have a golden finger? He took out the notebook in his backpack and flipped it over and over. He sighed and stuffed it back into his pocket. Thinking of Lao Yang, he couldn't help but grit his teeth. He took out his phone and dialed a number. He cursed, "Lao Yang, are you King crazy? You're introducing me to an interview to be a gigolo. You're crazy about the intermediary fee, aren't you? Hey, I didn't ask clearly. They want young, experienced, good-looking, and talented people. I thought you were so poor. Isn't it for your sake? Don't be angry. How about I treat you to a meal the day after tomorrow? To celebrate your sister-in-law's recent discharge, remember to bring some chives over. Bring your ass. Do you want to eat or not?" Huaishi hung up the phone angrily. This bastard must have done it on purpose. He was counting on the intermediary fee he gave him after he accidentally got on the pirate ship. But when he thought of Lao Yang's family situation, he couldn't hate him. In order to raise money for his wife's medical expenses, this bastard was practically desperate to earn money. Otherwise, he wouldn't even do a part-time business like Huaishi just for the commission of a few dozen yuan. Moreover, other than the fact that the intermediary fee was not discounted, this guy was quite generous. He didn't use any excuses to cheat him of his money. They were brothers in the same boat. Forget it, forget it. Huaishi sighed and heard the sound of thunder. Above the gloomy sky, dark clouds floated in from afar. Under the dim sunlight, corals could be vaguely seen growing between the clouds, and the shadows of fish swimming. The slightly blue ocean gently swayed, sprinkling a ripple of light to the earth. It was going to rain. It was said that 70 or 80 years ago, this kind of coral cloud was rare. At that time, they were still in the sea, not floating in the sky. Many scientists said that it was the discovery of some rare element or the cause of atmospheric pollution, but not many people believed it. In the beginning, everyone was panicking, thinking that the end of the world was coming. But after waiting for a few decades, they didn't see the classic apocalyptic species like zombies. After a long time, everyone got used to it. It was just something floating in the sky. It was nothing more than a little rain. Even if the plane changed its route, wouldn't it still continue to fly? Money had to be earned, debts had to be paid, and life had to go on as usual. After a few days of chaos, everything returned to normal. It seemed to be no different from the previous days. Thunder rumbled. Huaishi didn't bring an umbrella, so he didn't dare to waste time. He turned around and ran home. Just as he was running, he heard a loud noise from afar. This time, the thunder was particularly clear, and even the earth trembled. He looked up in the direction of the sound and saw a cloud of smoke and fire rising from the dock in the distance. It seemed that something had exploded. The pedestrians on the street looked at each other with a blank expression. Some people excitedly took out their phones to take pictures, and some people excitedly moved closer to see what was happening. If it was in the past, Huaishi might have gone to see something strange, but now he felt that his spine was about to be crushed by the double burden of life and being a prostitute. So what if it was fun? Let's forget about it. He sighed, turned left into the alley, and sped up. Bang! At the end of the alley, a bottle was kicked to the wall, and the glass was scattered all over the ground. Then it was stepped on by a leather boot. Someone rushed out from the corner. As if drunk, he staggered and didn't even slow down. He brushed past Huaishi, and his whole body was plastered to the wall. Huaishi was stunned. What kind of hero was this? but he didn't expect that the hero would stagger back from the collision. After seeing Huaishir, he suddenly pounced on him. Huaishir couldn't dodge in time and was grabbed by the wrist. Then, he felt a heavy box being stuffed into his arms. What the hell? He was stunned and instinctively wanted to pull his hand away, but he felt that his hand was wet. Sticky red liquid flowed out from the man's sleeve. It was blood. Until now, the thick smell of blood that couldn't be dispersed rushed to his face. Huaishir suddenly felt an intense dizziness and headache. She bent over and involuntarily vomited a mouthful of saliva. When he looked up, he finally saw the man's ferocious face and twisted facial features. He looked at Huaishir in shock. He seemed to want to say something, but he opened his mouth and spat out a big mouthful of blood. The scene was obviously so strange, but Huaishir accidentally saw that in the pool of blood he spat out on the ground, there was a small goldfish. It wasn't even big. It was the kind of goldfish that people kept in fish tanks for ornamental purposes. It looked fat and very cute. "Brother, you have such a strong appetite. Can this be eaten? It's still raw." Huaishir was dumbfounded. "Did you eat something bad?" But then, he saw the goldfish that was flopping in the pool of blood quickly shrivel up. In the end, it turned into a gray thing and melted in the blood. With the death of the goldfish, the man seemed to have lost all his strength. He fell to the ground and stopped breathing. Only thick blood seeped out from under the trench coat. In the silence, only Huaishir was left in the alley. And the box that was stuffed into his hand, the box looked bigger than an ordinary Rubik's Cube. It was heavy in his hand. When he shook it, it seemed to be filled with liquid. It had a cool texture that was unique to iron and copper, and the surface was engraved with beautiful totems that Huaishir had never seen before. However, these totems were covered by that person's sticky blood, so she couldn't see them clearly, but they seemed to have incredible magical power. Huaishir swallowed his saliva. He felt thirsty. Just holding in his hand, he couldn't help but want to open it. It was as if there was something inside that was incomparably tempting to him, making him want to possess and obtain it. He took a deep breath. Under such circumstances, was there even a need to think about what to choose? Huaishir took out his phone without hesitation. "Hello, 110?" Chapter 3. Name: Huaishir, age 17. In the police station, Huaishir, who was taking down his statement, felt that the conversation was too familiar. Had it been repeated several times somewhere? Fearing that there would be an accident, after taking down the statement, he held the policeman's hand and asked repeatedly, "You don't hire prostitutes here, do you?" The policeman's face twitched, but he didn't want to pay attention to him. He poured him a cup of tea and said that he could leave after the inspection. Huaishir sat on the chair and sighed with lingering fear. Alley, dead person, little goldfish, iron box. With so many strange elements piled up together, even Huaishir, who had experienced ups and downs in his life, couldn't wrap his head around it. But the only thing he was sure of was that this was definitely not normal. Thinking about the explosion at the port just now, he was afraid that it was an internal fight among drug dealers. What if there were 2 ounces of pure white flour in the box? It would be fun if he was caught by the police. Although he was so poor that he couldn't afford to eat, there was no need for him to go to the prison to find a buffet, right? In this case, as a citizen of the Republic of Dongxia. No, as a person with a little bit of common sense, he should have called the police, right? Yes, you did a good job. In this kind of situation, the most rational thing to do is to ask the police for help. In the evidence room, the policeman who returned his things nodded in agreement. If it wasn't powder, but a bomb, the situation would be even worse. But what was in the box? Huaishir asked curiously. "I don't know. I've looked for an X-ray and did an explosive detection. There shouldn't be anything dangerous inside, but it looks like an antique. As for what it is, we'll wait for the experts to come tomorrow to open it. But there's nothing for you to do here. Go home first." As he spoke, he put the basket in front of Huaishir. Because it was a death case, all of Huaishir's belongings were taken apart and checked. After getting it, Huaishir immediately took out the thick notebook that he had carried with him for several years and checked it. It hadn't been touched by anyone. The police officer in the evidence room couldn't help but laugh. "What's wrong?" Are you afraid that we will read your diary? Young people still keep diaries nowadays. Haha, don't worry. I didn't read it. Huaisher smiled awkwardly and stuffed the notes into his pocket. When he picked up his phone, he accidentally saw the bank balance message. His heart ached again. After repeatedly confirming with the police that there was no reward for such a report, he walked out of the door in pain, feeling the world was bleak. As he walked on the road with his head drooped, the streetlights cast a long shadow behind him. A crow flapped its wings and rose from the swaying shadows. Boom! Thunder flashed in the night sky. It was as if they were waiting for Huaisher to go out. After a short pause in the evening, the heavy rain came roaring with lightning and thunder. By the time Huaisher returned home, he was already drenched. Standing in front of the big iron door, he sighed, took out the key, unlocked the iron chain on the door, and pushed the door open in the sharp sound that even the pouring rain could not suppress. "I'm back." In the darkness, there was no response. Under the flashlight of the phone, the old house that was covered in dried leaves revealed its dilapidated appearance. Under the layers of ivy and vines was the peeling paint of the wall. Behind the iron door, the courtyard that was covered in dried leaves was a mess. The well-maintained fountain had already dried up. The stone carvings on both sides were incomplete. It looked strange and eerie. In the cloudy sky, a sharp flash of lightning suddenly lit up, and it lit up the sinister silhouette of the old house that extended out from the courtyard. At the foot of Qingxiu Mountain, near Exinhai City, was Huaisher's home. A long time ago, it was known as Yu Garden Chalcedony Hall. At the time, this garden that took 5 years and cost a fortune to build could be said to be extremely luxurious. The garden was filled with flowers all year round, and the front door was filled with evergreen pines and cypresses. Naturally, the interior of the building was luxurious. The owner was one of the richest businessmen in Huadong. But that was something that happened 90 years ago. The world was always changing too fast. In just 90 years, the old steam era had entered the electronic era, and from the electronic era to the new electronic era. The world had gone from peace to chaos, and from chaos to peace again. Too many things had happened, and too many things needed to be remembered. Therefore, there were many things that needed to be remembered, and many things that needed to be remembered were relatively less important. The Yu Garden of today, after experiencing a short period of glory, had gone through a long period of silence and decay. It had been forgotten by most people. In the midst of the wild grass, the past luxuries were no longer there. The creeping ivy covered the cracks on the mottled walls. Most of the sculptures in the courtyard were broken, and they were beyond recognition. After being squandered and ravaged by the prodigal children, the once luxurious mansion was now empty. It was about to become... No, it had already become a haunted house that was not even famous. For Huaisher, this old house, a cello that was about to collapse, and his own bleak life were all that he had left. But as the old house became more and more dilapidated, Huaisher felt that even his own life was about to say goodbye to himself. The current balance of the savings account, ending with 8,193, is 144. 444 yuan. In the howling storm outside the window, Huaisher finally found the balance of his bank account. Oh my God, how am I going to live like this? Even if he ignored the symbolic string of zeros, he still had a strong urge to die. What could he do? This was the good fortune left behind by his parents. Originally, when Huaisher was born, his family at least had some foundation. If they pulled themselves together, it was not impossible to rebuild the family business. However, with the death of his grandfather when he was 3 years old, Huaisher's parents began to degenerate at a speed faster than light. In just a few years, they squandered the family property at a jaw-dropping speed. The pair of poisonous insects ate, drank, gambled, and smoked. Finally, before the company went bankrupt, they absconded with the money, leaving Huaisher alone to deal with the crazy shareholders who came to force him to pay his debts. Almost all of the valuable things in the house were taken away. Before Huaisher's grandfather died, he specially made a will and entrusted the lawyer to leave the old house to Huaisher. As long as he could officially inherit it when he came of age, Huaishur would probably be wandering the streets like a wild dog. Sometimes, people's endurance was really infinite. Take Huaishur, for example. Since he was 10 years old, he felt that he was going crazy. However, he did not expect that his nerves were a little too strong. Until now, there were no signs of schizophrenia. At most, he occasionally heard the sound of footsteps in the old house, heard water dripping from upstairs in the middle of the night, heard someone sighing when he was sleeping, and so on. Life had to go on. Even if it could not go on, he had to go on. Thinking about it carefully, it was really a miracle that he could live until now. Originally, everything would slowly get better. He would grow up, use his grades to get a scholarship to a university, and be able to find a job that could make more money. Finally, life seemed to be working hard to get closer to the right track. It was just that he was so poor that he was about to starve to death. Is life always so painful, or is it only childhood like this? Unfortunately, there was no middle-aged uncle who liked to raise flowers to answer him. He was neither childhood nor Matilda. Therefore, in the long night of sorrow, Huaishur squatted on the balcony, smoking a cigarette, staring at the rainstorm in the distance, and sighing helplessly. Thunder roared. The cold rain fell from the sky, as if it was going to swallow the whole world. The anger that Huaishur had been accumulating over the past few days finally erupted. It rose from the bottom of his heart, causing him to roar at the sky. Damned heavens, what's the use of doing so much? If you have the ability, just come and kill me directly. I want to defy the heavens. As he roared, the depression in his heart was vented, and Huaishur finally felt a little better. But then he heard a roar, and the dark clouds that were sprinkling endless rain and lightning suddenly shook, bursting with the sharp sound of tearing steel. Just above the Stone Marrow Museum, a huge hole was suddenly torn in the clouds. Then, a blazing electric whip came down, like a descending divine punishment, and blasted the railing in front of Huaishur, completely smashing the old railing into pieces. In the pungent smell of electrolysis in the air, debris flew everywhere, and Huaishur collapsed to the ground. Oh my God, is it that effective? He rolled and crawled back into the house, mustering the courage to poke his head out before closing the window and shouting, I won't defy the heavens. I won't defy the heavens, brother. I was just joking. Smack! The window closed. Huaishur sat on the chair on the verge of tears, and he couldn't help but want to howl at the sky again. There was no way to continue living like this. His bank account had fallen to 3 digits, and he had almost accidentally applied for a job at a brothel when he wanted to find a job. He had encountered a bizarre death when he wanted to go home, and he had been warned by lightning when he came back to defy the heavens. The only thing he could do now was to count on his stupid netizens to bring some joy to his painful life. Huaishur turned on his phone with a glimmer of hope, and then saw that someone in the class's WeChat group had posted a photo of him standing at a brothel. A group of people were vigorously odding him, and there were even people named Beast and Slave shouting, Congratulations to President Hawaii for making your debut as the center of the world of brothel. Do you want the girls in class to jointly send you a wreath? Get lost, I don't like girls. I like baldies with soft skin like you too. After Huaishur finished replying, he turned off his phone and couldn't help but cover his face. All right, now the news that he had almost become a brothel had spread all over the world. What was the most depressing thing in the world? It wasn't the loss of a good reputation after 10 years, but the loss of a good reputation before you had even done anything beastly. What a loss. Why was it like this? With such a big house and a golden finger, there should have been 2 types of joy overlapping with each other. These 2 types of joy should have brought more and more joy. He should have been able to enjoy the blissful time of his life. But why? Boom! Before Huaishur could finish speaking, another thunderclap came from outside the window. Even through the window, it gave him a fright. He didn't dare to let his imagination run wild anymore, and could only take out the thick notebook from his bag with tears in his eyes. Can't you work harder? Look at other people's gold fingers. They could add points, give missions, and even turn to girls. Why do you only know how to write a diary? That's right, this thing was his gold finger. Ever since he picked up this thing when he was 9 years old and had a high fever, he knew that this thing was no ordinary thing. He kept it safe, And when he grew a little older, he dreamed every day that he would hear a mysterious voice in his ear saying, "Super XX system has been loaded." Then he would be able to make a name for himself, become a Buddha, and turn his life into a novel. He would be able to count money until he burned hundreds of money counters. He would be famous until he died, and then he would be able to turn into a girl and enter the card pool. In the end, he still hadn't found out what this lousy thing was for. It looked like a lousy notebook. It couldn't be torn, burned, or soaked. The only thing that seemed impressive was that it would automatically write a diary every day, updating in real time what he was doing at every moment. It was as if it was saying, "I'll write down all the silly things you did when you were in your second year of middle school and show you in the future." He lifted the thick cover, and the silhouette of the crow on the title page was still striking. Huaishir directly flipped to the end and reviewed his fantasy life today. When he saw the description of himself coming out of the police station, he was stunned. Among the swaying shadows, it seemed like a crow flapped its wings and rose. After Huaishir finished reading, he couldn't help but sigh. "I didn't expect this lousy thing to be able to describe the atmosphere. In the future, let me copy a few paragraphs to write some fantasy novel. I can cheat some money." Of course, this embarrassing sentence was also recorded mercilessly. Huaishir sighed and continued to flip to the back. However, he didn't expect that the back of the notebook, which was supposed to be blank paper, had an extra thick page at the back. Then, behind the page, there were a few strange files. It looked like a resume from somewhere, and there was even a 2-inch bareheaded photo attached. Most of them had big heads and thick arms. There was a burly man who could beat up several of Huaishir's men. Among them, there were a few young ladies with snake-like faces that he had never seen before. There was also a bald, prematurely aged middle-aged face that he seemed to have seen in the local news. Chunbo, Wang Quan, Mu Jing, Lu Bai. Those strange files were increasing rapidly, and when it finally stopped, there were more than 70 of them. What the hell? Huaishir looked at the notebook in his hand in astonishment. He pinched his chin and muttered, "Could it be that it was activated by a lightning strike?" He pushed open the window, put the notebook on the balcony, and shouted to the sky, "How many more times do you want to try?" God ignored him and didn't even bother to throw another dog at him. In the awkward silence, only the updated record on the page recorded the stupid thing he had just done. Ahem, let's pretend that nothing happened. Huaishir sighed, took the notebook back, and threw on the table. Forget about it. If he couldn't figure out what was going on, he still had to continue looking for a job tomorrow. Let's go to sleep first. Everything can happen in dreams. He threw himself on the bed and closed his eyes. When he opened his eyes again, he saw a hunched figure standing under the dim light of the street lamp. It was half-squatting like an ape. When it raised its head to look at him, it revealed a ferocious mask. The next moment, he was dead. Chapter 4. Huaishir screamed as she woke up from her bed and saw the mess in her bedroom. It was a nightmare, but the tragic death in the nightmare was so vivid that his neck still felt the phantom pain of being torn apart. He touched his neck with lingering fear and felt cold sweat, but he was very sleepy. After drinking a mouthful of water, he lay back on the bed and closed his eyes. In a trance, he seemed to have become a security guard on the night shift. He took the time to walk out to smoke in front of the door when he heard footsteps in the corridor. In the darkness, someone was gradually approaching. When he put out the cigarette and was about to turn around to ask something, he saw a hideous mask stained with blood. Fierce Ape. Fierce Ape grinned and smiled. In the next moment, he was dead again. Huaishir screamed again as she jumped out of bed. She saw the mess in her bedroom and the dust on the ceiling that had been shaken by her screams. He panted violently and touched his stomach. It was a nightmare again. This time, his stomach was directly dug out from the bottom up, and then his neck was pulled out. Damn it, I'm seeing a ghost. He panted for a long time and lay on the bed. He wanted to stay up all night, but he didn't expect that he would fall asleep again. This time, he became a fat man who had just finished his fun and was about to go home. He washed his hands, sang, and was about to change his clothes when he saw blood seeping in from under the door. The footsteps in the pool of blood gradually approached. Someone pushed the door open. Then he died again. Damn it, I'm seeing a ghost. Fleischer opened his eyes angrily, wrapped himself in the quilt, and turned over. I don't believe it. He closed his eyes, and then he had a nightmare for the whole night. It was not until dawn that he finally returned to normal and fell into a deep sleep. Before he fainted, he vaguely saw that in the deepest part of the shadows of the dream, there was a blood-red eye quietly staring at him. At 3 o'clock in the morning, AI Ching heard the sound of the phone downstairs. Soon, the sound of the phone stopped abruptly. Not long after, someone knocked on the door. "Miss, it's a sea-level alarm." AI Ching sighed. "Help me change." A woman in a tight suit came in and helped her up from the bed. She helped her change out of her pajamas and then put her underwear on her naked white body. The thin girl was helped up and stood in front of the mirror, supporting herself with a walking stick. "Which one are you wearing today?" "The black one you bought a few days ago, right? It'll go with the long skirt. Remember to bring a blanket." "All right." 15 minutes later, AI Ching, who was sitting in a wheelchair, was pushed into a car by a lady holding an umbrella. In the pouring rain, the car drove all the way. Finally, they showed their ID outside the barrier and drove all the way to the scene. The torrential rain had washed away the bloodstains outside. Only white sheets could be seen covering the corpses, but the scene indoors was still intact. Seeing the car coming, someone came up to greet it. The car window rolled down, revealing the girl's pale face due to lack of sleep. "What happened?" "It's a special crime." The person outside said, "According to the rules, we must inform the local prosecutor of the Astronomical Society immediately to deal with it." Sure enough, AI Ching sighed tiredly and patted the armrest of the wheelchair. The lady driving the car held an umbrella and moved her wheelchair and the girl out of the car with one hand. She carefully placed them in a place where the rain couldn't reach. "What's the situation at the scene?" As if it had nothing to do with her, AI Ching asked coldly. "Are there any survivors?" "No." The people at the scene shook their heads. Jinhao Baths is a newly opened clubhouse. Prostitutes, security guards, there wasn't a single survivor from the inside out. The delivery man discovered the situation, and by the time we arrived, an hour had already passed. Then, a police station in Qingpu district was attacked, but there were no casualties. "I see." AI Ching didn't ask any more questions. She just looked up and said to the capable female driver behind her, "Take me to see. I haven't been to a brothel before." The scene was not big. It was 4 floors and a basement. There were only bloody footprints and broken limbs. The beautiful corpses in the lounge also had all kinds of horrible marks on them that one couldn't bear to look at them directly. AI Ching finished watching and yawned expressionlessly. "Is there a surveillance camera?" "It was taken away. All the cameras are broken, but we just found that there are records in the surrounding traffic cameras." "Let me take a look first." AI Ching knocked on the armrest of the wheelchair with disinterest. The person at the scene sighed helplessly. He didn't get angry. Instead, he waved to the engineer to send the surveillance video. Anyone who saw AI Ching would definitely see her face first. They would be attracted by her pair of calm and indifferent eyes. Then, they would see her wheelchair. Then, they would feel pity in their hearts. It was a waste of God's gift for such a good-looking girl to have a leg injury. Even if her personality was strange and indifferent, and she had never even smiled at people. After working with her so many times, the person in charge of the scene had long been used to her indifference and was not surprised. There was not much footage in the surveillance camera. Most of it was a flash of a black shadow flying past before the person was torn apart. Only in the end, when the figure came out of the gate, was the front profile captured by the traffic camera on the opposite side of the road. Nothing could be seen clearly. "It's all useless. Don't look at it." AI Ching looked away and looked at the person at the scene. "What's the situation in the police station on the other side? No casualties?" "Yes, because it attacked the evidence room. It directly tore down the wall and entered. At night, the door was locked and no one was on duty, but there is a video." The person at the scene hurriedly called the video and played it. In the video, the evidence room was silent. Then, there was a roar like an earthquake. The wall shook, and then a crack broke open. A stooped figure came in and took advantage of the short time when no one was there to rummage through the room. Finally, he smashed open the cabinet and took out something. When he turned around and saw the surveillance video, he threw something out. The screen suddenly turned black. AI Ching reached out and paused the video. Then, she rewound the video for a few seconds. In the video, the person who was facing the surveillance camera was wearing an ape mask. He was stooped and was holding something in his arms. Zoom in here. AI Ching's eyes widened slightly. She leaned closer and stared at the zoomed-in image in the box in the person's arms. What is this? I don't know, the Rubik's Cube? The person at the scene was also confused. Immediately, they were dumbfounded by their own ridiculous conjecture. AI Ching pondered for a moment and asked, "Is there a record of the things in the evidence room?" Soon, a management directory that was locked in the cabinet was sent over. At the end, there was a photo of the strange metal box, the police dispatch record, and the files of the crime scene. A corpse? AI Ching frowned. Whose corpse was found when we reported the case? A local man who was released after serving his sentence. His name is Liu Uryo. He has a record of drug use. The information is here. We saw him in the club surveillance video. All the files were sent to AI Ching's mobile phone. First, there was a poisonous bug with a criminal record who died in an alley after visiting a prostitute. Then, the entire nightclub was massacred. The police station where the evidence was kept was also attacked. In the end, the attacker took away a small box. AI Ching rubbed her eyebrows in annoyance. Another relic from the border? She knocked on the armrest unhappily. What do the people at the border eat? Why do they always throw this kind of garbage into the present? This is the 6th case this year. Also, if this is the case, the explosion at the harbor during the day must be related to this, right? Why didn't anyone inform me? The middle-aged man who cooperated with her at the scene was stunned for a moment. His expression immediately turned bitter. I'm not sure. Maybe they're still going through the process. If you like to go through the process so much, why don't you go through the process for a while after such a big mess tonight? AI Ching's tone was not without mockery. She had long been aware of the locals' distrust of the Astronomy Society. It's okay. It's understandable if you put yourself in their shoes. Who would like a female cripple who is less than 20 years old to criticize them? The middle-aged man could only smile with a bitter face. Then, he cursed the group of idiots above him in his mind. After asking someone to buy her hot coffee, AI Ching frowned and took a sip. Then, she threw it aside in disgust. Instant. It's too late. I can't get the one you want. All right, stop acting pitiful. AI Ching glanced at him uninterestedly and knocked on the screen. There weren't many surveillance videos at the time of the crime. There should be some before, right? When the first body was found, who was the one who reported the case? Soon, the image of the gate on the screen quickly retreated. In the end, it stopped at the body of a young man with messy hair. On the screen, he turned around to look at the police station behind him and showed his face. In the silence, AI Ching bit her finger and did not speak. Tisk. As if it was an illusion, the middle-aged man heard her extremely unhappy voice. In the morning after the rainstorm, he could vaguely hear the birds outside the window and smell the fragrance of grass and trees blowing through the gaps in the window. After a night of nightmares, Huaisher finally woke up from his long-lost dream of being a fat otaku. He opened his eyes. Then, he saw the black muzzle of a gun. Those soldiers wearing bulletproof vests and masks had filled the room. They were almost armed to the teeth. Their guns and cannons were all aimed at his face. "Boss, don't shoot. We're on the same side." Huaisher was stunned for a long time. He swallowed his saliva and slowly raised his hands. "Who the F*** CK is on the same side with you?" JP, although the leader did not speak, his eyes were full of disdain. Then, Huaisher felt that someone had stabbed a needle into his neck. Then, everything went black and he didn't know anything. Name? Huaisher, age 17. In the interrogation room, Huaisher, who was handcuffed to a chair, lowered her head listlessly. She wondered if this godforsaken place was also recruiting male prostitutes. What the hell? What's going on? What should I do? Huaisher felt that his face had become a classic emoji display screen. In the end, it became a thick black question mark. JPG. What the F***CK is going on? The group of people changed several times, and the questions changed several times. They asked him where he was yesterday, what he did, who he was, and what evil forces were behind him. It was as if she was treating Huaishir as some kind of evil criminal. The interrogators took turns. They changed from a solo mission to a team mission. They talked about the good cop and the bad cop. There were also all kinds of torture techniques to deter people. In the end, Huaishir was about to collapse. Good men, please give me a quick death. Huaishir lay on the table with tears in his eyes. I'll confess. I'll confess everything. But can you at least tell me what I did? I'm a good citizen, really a good citizen. Yesterday, I saw a murder scene and even called the police. You can't accuse me. Behind a one-sided mirror, AI Ching watched the whole process expressionlessly. It was only when the middle-aged man in charge became impatient and waved his hand for the punishment that she spoke. If it really involves relics from the border, even if you torture him, I'm afraid he won't say anything. Besides, can't you tell whether he's telling the truth or not? But we only have this one clue. The middle-aged man was also helpless. Then what should we do? AI Ching shook her head, took out her phone, and opened her contact list. Finally, she found a number. Although there aren't many locally registered ascendants, there are many who are willing to maintain cooperation with the authorities. However, due to the delay in your internal process, the case has occurred. Astronomy will not bear the employment costs. Do you understand? I understand. The middle-aged man sighed. It's only the middle of the year. There's still more than half of the budget left. I'll double it to you, okay? The call went through. AI Ching asked straightforwardly, Special Affairs Division, 15 minutes, okay? Soon, the call was hung up. 15 minutes later, someone was brought in by the guards. It was obviously not his first time here. He greeted AI Ching familiarly. Ms. AI, long time no see. Why don't you come over to my place? It's too dirty. AI Ching stuffed a file over expressionlessly. She pointed at the young man behind the one-sided mirror who was lying on the table, shouting that he wanted to expose something on Weibo. Let him talk. Can you do it? It's a piece of cake. The newcomer grinned, flipped his hair, and pushed the door open. But when he saw Huaishir's face, he was stunned. Huaishir is also dumbfounded. Wait, why are you here? He looked at the male prostitute at the door, who had once taught him to know the rules, and shouted angrily, I understand now. You're all in this together. And you said you don't hire male prostitutes here. I just didn't sell my body. Do you have to do this? In the awkward silence, only the young man's angry roar could be heard. You're forcing me into prostitution. Chapter 5. Behind the one-way mirror, in the awkward silence, the Special Affairs Division's people couldn't help but reach for the guns at their waists. They wanted to kill this embarrassing thing before the news spread. Only AI Ching remained calm. She only took a sip of her coffee, then took out a pair of heavy sunglasses from the pocket of her wheelchair and put on her face. Continue, she said. The middle-aged man hesitated for a moment, then sighed and ordered through the microphone on the table, continue. After a long time, Mr. Kingpin finally reacted from the awkward encounter. He brushed his hair back, smiled warmly, and reached out his hand. Little brother, let's get to know each other. My name is Yu Dongri. Bullsh asterisk T. Who the hell wants to know you? Huaishir was furious. Now that he finally reacted, he pointed at Yu Dongri with his handcuffed hand and shouted towards the door, Comrade leader, I want to report this person for engaging in illegal activities. He's the leader of the male prostitutes. Don't be fooled by him. Yu Dongri sighed helplessly. He suddenly raised a finger and placed it in front of Huaishir. Look at my finger. No matter how stupid Huaishir was, he knew that something was wrong. How could he be willing to jump into his trap? He raised his head and accidentally saw his face, his fair skin and slender neck, a pair of eyes as deep as the ocean, and a few strands of golden hair hidden in his long hair that looked like twinkling stars in the universe. A few strands of hair fell between his eyebrows, covering his eyes that were as cold as the stars in a winter night. His tall and straight nose showed the masculine beauty of a man. Oh! Huaishir was stunned for a moment, but he didn't know why. but he suddenly felt nauseous. He secretly blamed himself. How could he look at someone who was better looking than him, so ugly? His pale face squeezed out a smile with difficulty, but the delicious water leaked out from the corner of his mouth. In an instant, his entire being was dumbfounded. He held Yu Dongri's little hand and rubbed it without loosening his grip. He said familiarly, "Big brother, where do you work?" "Oh, I'm really sorry for being so rude last time. Let me introduce myself. I'm Huaishir, 17 this year. Do you still remember me?" At this moment, not only Huaishir, but everyone who saw Yu Dongri behind the one-way mirror couldn't help but gasp. Even the middle-aged man, who had always been the most serious, blushed. His heart skipped a beat, and he turned his head away and coughed softly. Only Ai Ching, who was wearing large sunglasses, was still drinking her coffee calmly. She reached out and pressed the call button. "I didn't call you here to let you go crazy. Restrain your soul radiation. Let's get down to business." All right. Yu Dongri raised his finger and pushed the black-rimmed glasses on the bridge of his nose. He sat opposite Huaishir with a gentle smile and asked, "Little brother, since we know each other, can you answer a few questions for me?" Okay. Huaishir grabbed his hand and didn't let go. He was drooling and looked like a fool. "Big brother, I'll tell you anything you want to ask. My bank card password is 18,191. Ahem, that's not necessary." Yu Dongri quickly waved his hand, then opened the file in his hand and coughed softly. "Where were you last night?" "At home, sleeping. I had several nightmares that scare me to death." "Let me tell you, just sleeping?" Yu Dongri was not interested in what nightmares he had, so he interrupted and asked. "Yes." Huaishir nodded. Who would run away in the middle of the night for no reason? Besides, it was raining so heavily last night. Only a lunatic would leave the house. "Let me tell you, although our house is a little shabby, our ancestors were—" "Ahem. Next question." Yu Dongri interrupted him again. "What was in the box you sent to the police station?" "I don't know." Huaishir simply shook his head. Who would open that kind of box of unknown origin to take a look? It scared me to death. Let me tell you, that person suddenly pounced on me and vomited blood. In the next hour, Yu Dongri repeatedly asked the questions in the file, messing up the order and even suddenly asking irrelevant questions, until Ai Ching's voice came from behind a one-way mirror. "It's done." He finally breathed a sigh of relief and pulled his wrist out of Huaishir's hand. It was full of red marks. Fortunately, he pulled out early. If he pulled it out a little later, it would have been broken by this grandson. The moment he breathed a sigh of relief, Huaishir suddenly woke up from his stupor and looked at him blankly. He didn't know what had happened. It was like he had a nightmare that was so real that he began to despise himself. Ugh! He suddenly got up from the chair, but he couldn't get up because he was handcuffed. He awkwardly bent over and vomited violently. When he thought of how he was just like in heat, he felt indescribably nauseous. He vomited until his snot and tears almost flowed out. "Damn pervert, what did you do to me?" "Ugh." Before he finished speaking, he vomited again and couldn't help but cry. "Oh my God, I don't even have a girlfriend. How could I be turned gay by this damn pervert? My reputation is ruined. I'm going to King kill you, you bastard." "Sorry, no one wanted this to happen." Yu Dongri seemed to be used to this kind of scene. He sympathetically handed him a glass of water. As a person, the most important thing is to be happy. "Are you hungry, Ugh?" Before he finished speaking, Huaishir vomited again. At this moment, behind the one-way mirror, there was also the sound of vomiting and nausea. The middle-aged man's face was ashen. He pressed on his painful stomach. The person beside him passed him a stomach medicine and a glass of warm water. It was the female driver who had been silently following behind Ai Ching. "Thank you." He forced a smile and ate the medicine. After panting for a long time, he finally calmed down a little. "How is it?" Ai Ching said. "I told you, you can't get anything out of him. Maybe he's pretending." The middle-aged man coughed dryly. "I know about Yu Dongri's soul ability. It's a charm effect, right? Although it's effective on ordinary people, ascendants might not fall for it." "How can Yu Dongri not know whether he fell for it?" or not. Moreover, if there's a man who's at the most exuberant stage of self-esteem and desire, who can pretend to this extent, I think you won't be able to get anything out of him no matter what you think. AI Ching looked at him deeply. Give up. I've looked at the file. If we're talking about the suspicion of that brat, I'm actually his alibi. Yu Dongri walked in from the interrogation room. He threw the file full of notes back on the table and sighed helplessly. That brat was still at our club 3 minutes before the explosion at the harbor. Interview? What can he interview for? To be a gigolo? I think he was tricked by an intermediary, right? He only found out halfway through the interview and was scared away by the supervisor. Yu Dongri shook his head. He looked at Huaishi's frontal photo in the file and sighed. If you ask me, he has quite the potential. He has a good air about him, but it's a pity he doesn't wear it well. If he changes into a slim-fit suit and removes that shameless smile on his face, he'll be a living example of abstinence. Old Annies love this kind of little hedgehog that can't be eaten enough. I didn't call you here to make a career plan for him. AI Ching interrupted him. He's just an ordinary person who was accidentally involved in the incident. Let him go after signing the confidentiality agreement. It's a waste of time to stay. It was decided. 15 minutes later, Huaishi, whose soul was ravaged, was stuffed into the car and sent away after signing a lot of documents. In front of the gate, Yu Dongri put his hands in his pockets and looked at the struggling young man who thought he was going to be shot. He couldn't help but laugh. By the way, what's his name? He looked at AI Ching behind him. Huaishi. You know him? Yu Dongri smiled mysteriously. That's why you helped him get away with it, right? Don't underestimate the intuition of a gigolo, Miss AI. Unexpectedly, AI Ching's expression was still calm. Ah, I guess I know him. Very close. Not really. I'm 3 years older than him. When we were young, we played pretty well. Oh. Yu Dongri turned around in surprise. He never thought that the two had such a relationship. What happened later? Later, AI Ching glanced at him. Later, his family went bankrupt because of my grandfather's breach of trust. We haven't seen each other since then. Yu Dongri was stunned and didn't know what to say. In an enclosed basement, someone pushed the door open and entered. The restless man jumped up from the chair and looked anxious. Why are you so late? Do you think that no one noticed last night? The blood-stained ape squatted on the chair and chuckled. Thanks to you, I had a good time. Where's the thing? The man anxiously stretched out his hand. Did you get the thing back? A blood-soaked plastic bag was thrown into his arms. It's back to the owner, but the man was overjoyed at first, but the moment he took the bag, his face changed. He tore the bag open crazily, took out the black iron box, and opened it carefully. But it was empty inside. Where's the thing? He screamed. Where's the origin substance inside? Where's the origin substance that I've collected from hurting for so long? Looking at the ape in front of him, his eyes became fierce. It's you. You didn't think that I could absorb nearly 1,000 origin substances, did you? The ape scratched the mottled white hair behind a mask and asked, if I had that ability, I would have become one of the High Lords a long time ago. How could I be ordered around by you? When I got it, it was empty. Instead of threatening me, why don't you think about how to explain it to the High Lords first? Because you privately used the sacred item for profit, you lost the origin substance that you've collected from herding for 12 years. You got your share of the money, too. The man lost his composure and roared, staring at the ape. If something happens, don't think that you'll get better. The ape didn't say anything. It just silently rubbed its fingers together, its iron nails clashing against each other, producing a sharp sound until the man's gaze shifted away from its body. There was a traitor among your own subordinates, which caused the sacred item to fall into someone else's hands. I took back the sacred item for the High Lords, so I have my own merits. Even if I made a mistake, it's not enough to incur excommunication, the ape said coldly. If I were you, I would definitely think of a way to make up for it. Isn't it just lost? Wouldn't it be fine as long as you find it before the High Lords find out? That's easy for you to say. The man angrily glared at it. How could it be that simple? Aren't those old men and women about to die? Might as well use the trash. That way, at least you can recover some of your losses the ape said casually. As for the origin substance that was worth 1,000 people, it definitely wouldn't have disappeared without a trace. Whether it's used to advance, prolong life, or trade, it all needs time. A few minutes later, a gloomy voice came from the secret room. Investigate. Who else touched this box? Chapter 6. I can't live anymore. Huaisher sat in the garden. His clothes were messy and his face was pale. When he thought about what had happened in the past 2 days, he couldn't help but look up at the sky and cry. This was no longer a situation where he was on the verge of bankruptcy. First, he was discovered by someone to interview for a gigolo job, and his reputation was ruined. Then, he inexplicably encountered a dead body. Then, he was pointed at by various cameras and brought into some strange department. In the end, his spirit suffered a terrible blow from the inside to the outside, from his spirit to his wallet. He could no longer support such a bitter and painful life, especially the record in the book just now. Huaisher wanted to die every time he read it. Unfortunately, his family was so poor that they couldn't even afford to buy a rope. The natural gas had been cut off for half a year. There was no way to seek death and no way to live. It's a dead ball. Forget it. He threw the notebook to the side. He was powerless, furious, and crying like a panda. After the fury and tears were over, he obediently picked up the notebook and wiped the dirt off it. Then, he sighed and continued to stare at the bare garden in a daze. It will pass. Why sure it will pass. Maybe after a while, he would forget about it. He secretly prayed in his heart. Then, he began to have a headache about where to earn the next living expenses. It's good that you can think that way. But after calculating the time, those guys should have their eyes on you. He heard an unfamiliar voice beside him. It sounded like a woman's voice. It was hoarse and charming, with a trace of indescribable mockery. She said, "Young man, you're going to die. You're the one who's going to die." Huaisher turned around and glared at her. Then he froze in place. There was no one beside him. This was his backyard. No one would come here in the first place, let alone talk to him for no reason. But who was the one talking? He saw a crow lazily combing its wings on the fence. "Don't be silly." "Yes, it's me." In his confused expression, the crow said indifferently, "It's the crow talking to you." "That's right. You're not having a nightmare." As she spoke, she seemed to have burped. "You can talk." Huaisher was stunned, then immediately became alert. "No, what the hell are you?" Crow chuckled softly, and his tone became aggrieved and mischievous. "Wow. When you stared at me every day without blinking, you treated me as a little sweetheart. Now you're calling me a ghost? You were that stupid book?" Huaisher reacted and flipped open the cover of the notebook. On the title page, the silhouette of the crow had disappeared without a trace. It was as if it had really become a living creature and had flown out of the page. More or less. Crow sighed and looked at the notebook in his arms. "Although I'm also a remnant, I'm just a small part of the record on it. However, if you confuse me with the kingdom of heaven, that would be too funny." After saying something that Huaisher couldn't understand, she suddenly changed the topic and stared at Huaisher with her red eyes. "However, this has nothing to do with who I am. The problem is, do you really think that I was tricking you?" She asked softly. "Didn't you personally experience the records of those people before they died?" Huaisher thought about the nightmare he had last night and subconsciously shivered. His voice became hoarse. "Are they really all dead?" "Ah, that's right." Crow nodded. "Apart from you, everyone who has seen that box is already dead. There really is a lot of good stuff inside. After sleeping for so many years, it's rare to be able to replenish so much origin substance. Although it's a bit messy, it should be enough for 800 or 900 people, right?" She smacked her lips and looked at Huaisher happily. "For the sake of those greeting gifts, do you need my help, young man? 40 grams of copper, 57 grams of silver, 12 grams of tin powder, a set of crucibles and gas burners, and the rest of the lead is free." In the evening, Huaisher, who had been running around the city all day, finally returned home. He threw the plastic bag in his hand on the table and picked up the leftover mineral water he drank the day before. He didn't care if it was healthy or not. "My money has been emptied, and I'm in debt." What's the use of buying these things? Alchemy, of course. Crow picked her feathers and calmly said, "It's not easy to create a sacred mark that ordinary people like you can use." Sacred mark? Huaisher laughed. Do you want me to be a cleaner in the air? What is this? A joke of modern people? No, it's just a trick used by trashy game developers to cheat money. Thinking about the few students in his class who were red-eyed from spending money, easily spending 50 to 30 to 40,000, Huaisher felt envious. It's not the same, Huaisher. Although the name is the same, the sacred mark I'm talking about is not that kind of ridiculous thing. Crow calmly explained. If the essence of the soul possessed by the ascended is the embryonic form of the divine right, then the sacred mark is the result of analyzing the legacy of the gods. By tracing back the traces of the miracle to find the way to the divine, imitating the gods, investigating the authority of the gods, and the remaining traces of the gods, the research results are the existence of the sacred mark. Using a secret instrument composed of metal and incense, imitating a huge miracle to create a small miracle. This is the sacred mark. God? Huaisher was stunned. Are there really gods in this world? There used to be. Crow was silent for a moment. But they're all dead. The things abandoned by the times are nothing to worry about in today's world. I'm afraid that soon, they won't even be worth remembering. In this regard, Crow didn't want to say more. He just urged Huaisher to set up the crucible and start the refining as soon as possible. Is it enough to just use these? When the temperature of the flame was enough, Huaisher followed Crow's instructions. He put on a mask and ground the lead into powder. He mixed it with his own blood and carefully wrote inscriptions that he didn't know at all on the thin metal. The structure of the inscriptions was very simple, but there was no room for error. Crow's eyes were terrible. Even if there was a slight deviation, he had to erase and rewrite it. After wasting a lot of blood, he finally finished this simple job. These are just auxiliary materials. Even the simplest sacred mark is not a result that can be smelted by mortal fire and mortal metal. Now, it's just the most simple emergency materials. In the future, when you want to make more advanced sacred marks, you'll need the blood of phantom beasts and a lot of sacrifices even. He paused for a moment and didn't say anything else. He just said lightly, rest for 10 minutes. We'll start again at 11:15. Remember, you only have one chance. If you miss it, I don't think you have enough money to start again, right? When money was mentioned, Huaisher suddenly became more and more nervous. He held the notes in his hand and repeatedly confirmed the order that Crow had dictated to him. He practiced it in his mind. Crow, on the other hand, stood next to the crucible and stared at the flame. In the blink of an eye, the crimson flame suddenly turned pure white. In the end, countless streams of light appeared, magnificent and gorgeous. But Crow's figure was becoming more and more faint. What is that? Origin substance that has been ignited. Crow glanced at him and didn't wait for him to ask again. He explained, origin substance is the substance that makes up the soul, the spirit that is stored in the substance. You can think of it as the fragments of the soul. You don't have enough materials, so you can only work on the flame. Now, you have to burn a person's soul every second. Don't worry about the source. These are all from that box. Huaisher swallowed his saliva, not knowing what to say. What was even more terrifying than burning a person every second was that, according to Crow, there were thousands of origin substances inside the box. What kind of damn thing was this? Don't think too much about it. It's starting, Huaisher. Crow glanced at Huaisher one last time. The liquid lead in the crucible was already boiling, but there was no stench or other odor. Instead, under the torment of the pure white flames, a faint trace of gold could be seen. It was as if there were golden dust floating in the middle of a light gray. Huaisher didn't have time to think too much about it. He grabbed the items that he had arranged in order and threw them into the crucible one by one. First was tin, then copper, and finally silver. Every time he threw them in, the liquid metal in the crucible didn't ripple at all. In an instant, the foreign objects were completely melted. The pure white flames suddenly rose, and countless rays of light were greedily sucked into the crucible. The intense light stung Huaishi's eyes. At the last moment, Huaishi heard Crow sigh. "I hope I made the right bet this time, Huaishi." As she murmured softly, she, who was already as thin as a phantom, suddenly spread her wings, flapped them, and flew into the crucible. Boom! With a muffled sound, the flames were extinguished. The liquid in the crucible rose up, forming a complicated outline in the air. In the end, it collapsed inwards layer by layer. Under Huaishi's stunned gaze, it gradually solidified and floated down from the sky. It was a feather, a metallic feather. The feather seemed to be made of pure silver. Every fork on it was slender and perfect, without any flaws. Light flowed across the mirror-like membrane, as if it was reflecting the entire world. All kinds of strange scenes constantly flashed by. The feather fell into Huaishi's hand. "This is my current body, a special type of sacred mark of the indefinite system, branches of events." Crow's voice sounded in his ear, full of exhaustion. "With that notebook and branches of events, even before the upheaval, you're qualified to be a registrar." Huaishi stared blankly at the thick notebook in her hand that was flipping through the pages without any wind. She felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. It was clearly a flowing handwriting, but she felt as if she was looking at herself in a mirror. Another hymn that only existed in written records. What is this thing? Well, if you want to say, it's probably the last remnant of the kingdom of heaven on earth. Crow sighed softly. You can call it the Book of Destiny. At that moment, countless flowing words suddenly gathered together. As the crow on the title page disappeared without a trace, new lines of words appeared. Huaishi, stress period, title, none sacred mark, none miracle mark, none skills, general knowledge LV3, art, performance, cello LV6, death premonition LV0. Look, the current you is the master that it acknowledges. Crow said tiredly. You can figure out the specific usage later. I'm going to sleep for a while. Wait a minute. What the hell is death premonition? Why is it so vague? Huaishi put his face on the title page. Only then did he see the almost indistinct line of words. It's the premonition of death. No matter what it is, after experiencing dozens of deaths in a row, there will be some experience, right? Indistinct and dim means that it has been learned, but not to the extent of being called a skill. But I didn't expect that there would be a LV6 cello performance. This guy might really be a genius. The voice gradually drifted away, and in the end, its voice could no longer be heard. It might really have fallen asleep. Only the dumbfounded Huaishi held the pen and book, not knowing what to do with it. Holding the quill known as branching matter, the corresponding operations and applications naturally appeared in his mind. Apart from manipulating some text-type objects, the greatest function of the quill was that it could write in the air and freely change colors. That's good. At least I can save on printing fees when I send out random ads in the future. Huaishi looked at the quill with a wry smile and finally looked at the book in his hand. After he carefully flipped through it, he found that there seemed to be no changes in it. Only in the files that appear at the end, there were a few that faintly glowed. Huaishi hesitated for a long time, raised the quill, and pointed at them. In an instant, the page shone brightly. The light engulfed him. Chapter 7. Under the scorching sun, he was sweating profusely. When Huaishi came back to his senses, he was standing on the field. Behind him, there was a constant chuckle. He seemed to be doing some radio gymnastics with the guy opposite him. Before he could react, a kick came from behind. A brawny man in a singlet pointed at him and scolded, "Chenbo, you coward! Didn't you eat?" After that, he pushed his opponent to the side and got into a fighting stance. "Come, let's spar." Huaishi looked over his shoulder and saw the slogan on the wall behind him. Sweat more in normal times and bleed less in wartime. Before he could react, his body seemed to move. He rushed straight at the brawny man in front of him. No, the instructor. Bang! A fist closed the door. Huaishi's vision went black, and he was in severe pain. Again, the instructor hooked his finger at Chenbo. Only now did he realize that he seemed to be in a strange state of possession. Like a spirit behind his back, he passively felt the feedback of this body. It was as if he was in a dream, but the pain was the only thing that was real, and there was no reduction in the slightest. Bang! Huaisher felt as if her face had been smashed into the ground after another trip and a joint grab. Again! Bang! Again! Bang! The scene was constantly changing. In those fragmented dream fragments, he seemed to be repeating the process of being abused by several instructors. They seemed to be specifically targeting the unlucky guy he had possessed. His movements were not standard. Another round of violent beating. Another round of violent beating if his reaction was slow. Another round of violent beating when he was about to eat. Another round of violent beating when he was just training. Beating Chunbo when he was eating and sleeping. There was even a nightmarish experience of having sex with a group of naked, muscular men in the dormitory, under the smell of body odor and feet. Huaisher had completely given up hope. When Chunbo was able to use military boxing to fight 2 rounds with the instructors and turn from a rookie to a slightly bigger rookie, he was expelled because he fought with a member of society during police training. He became a new member of society. It was really worth celebrating. Huaisher was about to cry. He finally didn't have to be beaten. What the hell was this? Could it be that he had accidentally obtained some sort of super beaten-up system? What happened next was simply indescribable. In a fragmented nightmare, Huaisher's identity kept changing from an unlucky student who was brutally beaten by the instructor with military boxing, to a gangster who carried a knife and fought with others on a hot day, to a guard who squatted in front of the door to see if there was an officer coming to crack down on illegal activities, to a pimp who entertained guests every night, and finally, a bald, middle-aged man who was in a meeting. This grandson really likes to attend meetings. Study sessions, seminars, inspection meetings, reports. They were simply putting their limited energy into endless meetings. The fragments continued to merge together like a dangerous building. When it reached its limit, it collapsed and turned into thousands of fragments again. Huaisher's consciousness was also pulled apart. Hundreds of thousands of himself were in parallel in hundreds of thousands of nightmares, constantly circulating. It was like a 150 yuan computer that overrated itself and loaded the task load of the Milky Way computer. In the end, the violently operating brain seemed to have a flame from the friction of the inside of the skull, burning everything to ashes. All the nightmares were suddenly shattered. Huaisher opened his eyes and panted violently. Sweat dripped from his face, slid down the armrest of the chair, and fell on the wet floor. The clock on the wall was still slowly turning. It had only been 5 minutes since he closed his eyes. He had already been beaten up 80 to 90 times, fought dozens of times, and was sent to the hospital several times. He had been out for hundreds of days and had sent little girls who wore very little to pink rooms thousands of times. He had attended countless meetings. It was simply a series of social experiences. It's really hell? Huaisher murmured sluggishly. He couldn't support his body and slid down from the chair. In a daze, he closed his eyes. Just let me die. For a moment, he seemed to see his tragic future and made this wish from the bottom of his heart. Then, it became the same as all the wishes Huaisher had made before. There was no possibility of it being realized. When he opened his eyes, it was already the morning of the next day. He was still lying on the floor, but he felt a lot more comfortable, as if he had taken some kind of elixir. Soon, he saw the 4-needle in his hands. Yes, a bottle of saline and a bottle of glucose. You're awake? A crow's head suddenly popped out from the side and congratulated him with joy. We have cured your disease of seeing everyone as a pigeon. Then I really have to thank you. A doctor has the heart of a parent. Don't worry about it. The crow flapped its wings, flew to the edge of the table, and sat down with its legs crossed. One of its wings rolled up a cigarette of unknown origin, skillfully lit it, and smoked in a very sociable manner. But the smoke that it swallowed dissipated from under its feathers, which looked very strange. How is it? Did you get anything? The crow asked. Does being able to wake up alive count? Huaisher got up from the ground grumpily, but he didn't dare to pull out the foreign needle, so he could only carefully lean against the chair and sit down. Only then did he realize that he was no longer the same person as before. He was now a man with a status panel. Immediately, he opened the Book of Destiny and looked at his own data on the title page. Ignoring the inexplicable stress period and the empty stigmata and miracles column, below, it was a simple and easy-to-understand skill column. General Studies, which represented general knowledge and education, was still an extremely embarrassing level 3. Before he graduated from high school, he had already returned part of his knowledge to his physical education teacher. And the art column that represented his cello skills was level 6, which he was slightly proud of. He had already reached the professional level. If he wanted to level it up, he would have to rely on 99% of his sweat and that crucial 1% of his talent. And the inexplicable skill Death Premonition was still gray. It felt more and more like a strange game. Don't tell me I have to pay for it? Huaisha was faintly worried. After using it last night, Huaisha finally had a preliminary understanding of its classification. According to the rules of the Book of Destiny, only skills that could be mastered and used at what would be recognized as skills. And the limit that an ordinary person could reach through a lifetime of learning and constant practice was level 10, which was level 10. Usually, the first few levels of a skill were relatively easy, but just like the settings made by black-hearted game developers, the higher the level, the more effort it would take to increase it by a few hundred times. And for some people, level 10 was already the end, but for others, it might just be the starting point. Huaisha was well aware of this. It was like 2 test papers with full marks. Sometimes, level didn't mean anything. It was just a convenience that the Book of Destiny used to make it easier for him to measure himself. While feeling that there was still a long way to go, Huaisha continued to look down. Only then did he realize that he had gained a few new skills overnight. Combat, Basic Military Boxing LV4, Reconnaissance LV4. There was also a somewhat funny, Illegal Group Management LV4. Then, what the F *CK? Crow exclaimed, how come your copywriting skill is already LV6? Huaisha couldn't help but roll his eyes. Nonsense. Try holding hundreds of meetings in a row and then writing hundreds of meeting notes and learning experiences. Huaisha didn't have a deep understanding of military boxing. He could only learn it by passively taking a beating and watching from the sidelines. It was only when he was writing these hundreds of notes and learning experiences that he would truly shed tears of blood and bitterness with every word. His biggest gain this night wasn't learning how to practice military boxing or watch the police. It was learning how to make up the word count in his manuscript. Now, he had even surpassed his master. He could fill in the entire Pacific Ocean in his update without leaving a trace. Moreover, he could accurately divide it into 3,000 words to avoid losing out if he wrote too much. You can write this paragraph down properly. In the future, when you write notes, you can follow this format. He patted the Book of Destiny in his hand and sighed proudly. If I were to write novels, I would be rich. No one who writes novels has a good ending. Crow whispered in his ear. Many people start to go bald before they reach middle age. For example, that who's something, that was something, and that wandering army something, Huaisha shuddered. He couldn't afford to offend them. Forget it. But then again, Huaisha opened the book and flipped to the appendix files at the back. Those files seemed to have lost all their value. Most of the words had disappeared, leaving only a monotonous table. Why would the memories of these people appear in the book? Oh, you don't know. Crow seemed to be very surprised. He said calmly, the Book of Destiny is now bound to you. It will only record things related to you. The reason why these fragments are recorded is probably because they all died because of you, right? Huaisha was stunned. Ah, there are actually around 70 of them. Crow casually said, unfortunately, only 4 or 5 people had enough origin substance activity to leave behind the deepest impressions in their memories. Nowadays, the number of people with the potential to awaken is becoming fewer and fewer. You should really thank them. Huaisha sucked in a breath of cold air. He felt all the hair on his body stand on end. He subconsciously leaned back a bit, wanted to get as far away from Crow and the book as possible. However, he quickly understood that even if he threw the book and Crow into the ocean, it probably wouldn't be of any use. He finally understood why the soldiers had suddenly captured him and interrogated him. It was probably because those people from yesterday were already dead. They were all dead. Only he was left. Just thinking about this made him tremble. It was as if a blood-stained ape was already standing behind him, laughing viciously at him. After a long, long time, he finally calmed down and laughed dryly. Is it that exaggerated? Yes, it is that exaggerated. Why, sure, this is how the world is. It is not as stable as you think. This sky, this earth, this country, this city. In fact, there are many more things that you have never seen before. The truth that cannot be known by others. The border that cannot be entered by normal people, and the hell that cannot be seen by others. If you are forever immersed in the narrow sanctuary of the present realm, you will never know the truth. She admired the youth's sluggish appearance. She asked softly, "Why, sure, do you desire to have a soul?" Chapter 8. Sorry, I don't want to no time. Thank you. At the dock area, Ai Ching coldly rejected the man who kept pestering her to treat her to a meal and pushed her wheelchair past the cordon. The man who caught up was stopped by the police at the scene of the explosion. He awkwardly touched his nose and returned without success. Wow, what a cold-hearted person. Yu Dongri leaned against the wall and sighed. Don't always be so heartless, Miss Ai. If you ask me, it's not bad to have a spare tire. Ai Ching's wheelchair stopped next to him. The girl looked at him expressionlessly until he was a little scared and unconsciously looked away. Then she slowly said, if I have a little self-awareness about my situation, then I should first understand one thing. No one will truly fall in love with a rich cripple. Yu Dongri was stunned for a long time before he reluctantly smiled. Don't say that. You are so beautiful. Besides, love is always unreasonable. Yes, so I won't be reasonable. Ai Ching looked at him, and I have money. I'm the one who's paying you to work, and you're currently under investigation by the Astronomical Society. It's best if you don't tell your inspector about how you got rich. Yu Dongri shrugged helplessly and stopped talking. He obediently followed behind her and did his job as a thug and bodyguard, which was not very promising. After a night of heavy rain, the scene at the dock was beyond recognition. The original clues were also messed up because of the stupid actions of some people. The scene of the explosion was a half-collapsed warehouse. There was mud everywhere. 7 or 8 containers had been burned in a molten iron, and a part of the ash mixed with blood was smeared on the ground. You did a great job. Ai Ching nodded and praised. Are you being sarcastic? Yu Dongri asked. No, it's a serious compliment. Ai Ching raised her eyebrows and said happily. These kinds of vicious incidents involving relics from the border are often strange and difficult to deal with. God knows where there are clues. If I can't solve it, it will become a stain on my record during the assessment. Now that someone has taken the initiative to take the blame, I don't need to take any responsibility at all. When the Bureau comes to question me, I'll let those idiots who think they're smart take the blame. Yu Dongri's eyes twitched. He didn't know what to say. In any case, compared to this kind of quagmire of secret struggle, he, a cowherd, had become as pure as an angel. At this time, Ai Ching's phone vibrated. There was information. She looked down and was stunned, as if she was thinking about something. After a long time, he turned off the phone screen. What's wrong? Yu Dongri asked. We found a few more corpses. They were all homeless people with drug convictions. Ai Ching's fingers deftly spun the phone as she sighed mockingly. I don't know how long they were tortured before they died. TSK, what a tragic death. You going to the morgue again? Yu Dongri sighed helplessly and touched his face. It wasn't good for his skin to go to the morgue all the time. Why would I hurt my eyes for no reason? Ai Ching turned her wheelchair around and said calmly, since we've seen this scene, let's go home. When they're in a terrible fix, I'll be merciful and come out to save them. Yu Dongri was stunned. You already have a clue? Coming here is just a process. The real things to pay attention to can be understood after a brief look at the scene and the forensic report. The goods in the container were electronic products destined for Europe. The customs company was a shell company. If we investigate further, we won't find anything other than a scapegoat. Looking at the traces of the scene, we know that a group of people who profited from the border relics were fighting in the warehouse. The specific reason is probably because of the uneven distribution of the loot. What happened later is the reason we took over the case. These are all things that can be understood after a brief look at the report. What I'm more concerned about is this. AI Ching reached out, and two slender fingers took out a small bag of powder from the belt of the wheelchair. What's this? Yu Dongri was now perfectly adapted to his role as the supporting character. A hallucinogen found at the scene, a new type of drug. AI Ching said, "The test results from the technical department are out. There's a source in it, which means this was made by the box-shaped border relics." Yu Dongri felt a chill. If it could cause such a bad impact, then the severity of this incident would probably escalate. AI Ching said faintly, "If I report this news, after a while, those old guys who have been secretly making things difficult for me will have a very interesting ending, right?" Wait. Yu Dongri suddenly felt a chill at the back of his head. "You're telling me so confidently? Aren't you afraid that I'll tell others? You're not going to silence me, are you? I'll only tell you if you tell others." AI Ching casually shook the small bag at her fingertips and said casually, "Haven't you always been very proud of your communication skills? Then quickly go and tell them that their lives are in my hands. If they want to continue living happily as vermin, please hurry up and wag your tails before me and beg for mercy." F***CK. Yu Dongri couldn't help but want to slap himself. Why did he have to ask so many questions? No, why did he have to laugh at her just now? But in the end, in less than 10 minutes, he was caught in her trap. Wasn't this woman's desire for revenge a bit too strong? After a long period of shock and regret, Yu Dongri keenly discovered the biggest problem. But even if they're willing to lower their heads, you still need to have the confidence to solve this matter, right? Who says I don't have it? AI Ching turned her head. Although she didn't smile, her eyes were full of mockery. "But, do you really want to know?" "Sorry, I don't want to know at all." Yu Dongri's expression twitched, and he extinguished the last bit of probing. "This woman is really terrible. I want to." In Huaishi's house, the youth nodded in response to Crow's question and answered without hesitation. "Do you desire to have a soul?" Most people would hesitate when faced with this kind of sudden question and demon-like temptation, but he didn't even pause for a moment. After experiencing the strange events of the past few days and understanding his own situation, he became a bit more courageous. If he couldn't pass this level, he would die anyway. So what was there to be afraid of? Although he didn't know what a soul was, this didn't stop Huaishir from desiring one. Not only that, he also desired money, power, and children. But then again, shouldn't everyone have a soul? Crow asked back, "In fairy tales, everyone has a happy ending. Do you really believe that?" She was a bit unhappy that she didn't get to enjoy the tangled-up scene that she had anticipated. Even her explanation became less and less enthusiastic. The difference between a normal person and an ascended person is the existence of a soul. In the current era, there exists a creation called the Silver Sea. No, it should be said that it's a natural source of energy. It's also known as a perpetual motion machine, and is one of the sources that created this enormous world. And its true core is the Silver Sea formed by the projection of all human origin substances. It's said that the formless sea is unimaginably vast, and all human intelligence is just a branch that flowed out from it. Stepping onto the path of ascension, allowing one's iron and stone nature to pass through the Silver Sea and ascend to a golden soul. This is the original goal of alchemy. Only in this way can people possess a soul and be crowned with the title of ascended person. Otherwise, one's cognition and consciousness can only be carried by the strands of sparks in the synapses of the brain, unable to deal with the darkness and storms outside of the present realm. You keep talking about the present realm and the borders. Is there another world? Huaishir interrupted. From a certain point of view, yes, and not just one, but tens of thousands. The crow laughed eerily. However, this is not something you should be concerned about right now. You should think about how to awaken your soul first. Huaishir could only listen attentively. Currently, the Astronomy Association is in charge of guarding the Silver Sea. Based on the precipitation rate of all human origin substances, there will be about 300 to 400 spots every year. But this isn't your turn. Before it comes out, it will be divided up by the various branches of the administration. The list is scheduled until 10 years later. In reality, most ascended people don't rely on the Astronomy Association's special permission, but rather on their own to awaken. This is the path you need to take. Huaishir swallowed and nodded seriously. And then, for others, this process is naturally extremely difficult. For a modern person to leave the city and seek survival in the wilderness is even more dangerous. It's like taking a rocket with very little reserves and flying out of the atmosphere. Not only do you have to break free from the pull of the Silver Sea, but you also have to face all kinds of accidents and challenges. No one knows what awaits you. If you want to succeed, you can't lack strength and luck. But even if you have both, it can't be said to be perfect. Not only do you need an abundance of origin substances, but you also need a bit of luck. Often, it's like winning the lottery, difficult to replicate. Fortunately, there are so many people, so there will always be one or two who succeed. Then what about the ones who fail? Huaishir asked. Crow seemed to smile, but didn't say anything. Huaishir felt a chill in his heart. But don't worry, you don't need to worry about this problem. She raised her wings and patted Huaishir on the shoulder. You're blessed by the heavens, young man. With the Book of Destiny in your hands, you have the path to the heavens under your feet. Others are like Icarus, but you're like a ladder. You're very stable. Then, what do I have to do? It's very simple, Crow said. You just have to go and kill people. If you do it yourself, the Book of Destiny's records will definitely be more specific, right? Not only that, if you kill one, you'll be able to obtain that person's skill. If you kill 10, you'll become a fully deserving genius. As long as you have it, the more people you kill, Huaishir, the stronger you'll become. She whispered into the youth's ear. Aren't there so many people who look down on you? You must hate them to death in your heart, right? Not only your classmates and teachers, but also your parents who abandoned you. This world hasn't been good to you, so why treat it with kindness? Huaishir was stunned. Ah, you're really scared, aren't you? For a moment, Crow felt joy, but when Huaishir raised his head, she saw a trace of surprise in his eyes. Really? Huaishir didn't dare to believe it. You just have to kill people? Then let's start with Li Wuyong, Huaishir said with a finger. Who told him to always show off as good father and good uncle to me? The rich are heartless, damn it. There's also that woman who's flirting with him. The two of them have probably been together for a long time. The English teacher is the third, always making sarcastic remarks about me in class. All right, there's also that damn fatty who thinks I stole his money. His brother isn't a good person either, always getting into fights at school. I'm getting rid of evil for the people, right? Lao Yang, that stinking middleman, also needs to die. I work so hard to go out to work, but he casually moves his mouth and takes 20% of my share. As he spoke, Huaishir raised his head and looked at her expressionlessly. They all deserve to die because they've all offended me, right? Chapter 9. Crow was silent. It shouldn't be like this, right? Huaishir murmured softly. I know that not everyone should like me. I may be unsociable and not very popular, but maybe sometimes some people's actions need some punishment, but none of them should die. They're all living people just like me. They don't deserve to die, just like those people in the club don't deserve to die. Even if they may be guilty, they are innocent. So, I don't like what you said. Huaishir looked into her eyes and emphasized every word. I don't like it very, very much. Aya, why are you so fierce? Crow turned her head away and seemed to be sobbing sadly. Big sister, I'm doing this for your own good. Besides, my whole bird is now yours. Before we start working together, can't you test me a little? As she said that, she blinked her teary eyes. For the sake of big sister's sincerity, Can you give me a chance to mend the pen after the sheep is lost? If plan A doesn't work, we still have plan B. Unfortunately, a crow acting like this was not cute at all. What plan B? It's very simple. Crow looked at him one last time. Since you don't want to kill others, she said, then I can only kill you. At that moment, Huaishi's vision turned black. Huaishi had a long dream. In the dream, he seemed to have just finished work and was about to go home. As he waited for the subway, he seemed to despise a certain useless employee who was fired during the day. Then, the roar of the subway came from the depths of the tunnel. Before he could put away his phone, he heard a resentful voice behind him, "Go to hell." The next moment, a pair of hands pushed his back. He fell. He flew up. He fell down again towards the tracks. The lights of the subway became brighter and brighter, closer and closer. Then, Huaishi was crushed into pieces. The last thing he heard was the crisp sound of his skull breaking. An indescribable pain came, but before he could scream or feel fear, his consciousness quickly blurred. Then he seemed to have become a business tycoon who dominated the global economy. Now, he was cornered and trapped in a park. His assistant, who had betrayed him, sent him a final ultimatum to surrender. Huaishi smiled coldly and raised his pistol. Bang! A soft sound came from the helicopter in the distance. Huaishi could no longer feel his body. At the last moment, he heard his assistant shouting blankly, "Don't shoot, he's not." A headshot? In his dizziness, Huaishi did not have time to react. Like a series of nightmares, he suddenly turned into a middle-aged man wearing a strange power armor and carrying a gun. He rushed into the Louvre Museum and fought with a group of strange insectoid creatures. And then he quickly died. This time his last thought was, F***, I want to load. What file? Load your M. He began to laugh at himself, but soon he could not laugh because he seemed to be hanging on the city gate again. His hands were pierced with nails, but he did not feel any pain. His whole body was floating, as if drunk, and he smiled foolishly at the white-haired man in front of him. But why was this guy staring at him? Did he do something wrong? Soon, with a flash of moonlight, his head was chopped off. This time, it was a decapitation. Then, in the wild cheers of the crowd, he seemed to be tied to a stake and burned in the flames. Someone roared excitedly, "Die, heretic!" Then he went to die again. Just like that, he died over and over again in different ways. He was poisoned to death, drowned to death, hanged to death, burned to death, stuffed into a meat grinder, sent to the emergency room, accidentally pushed, and killed by all kinds of people and himself for all kinds of reasons. Again and again and again and again. Death, 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 death. He did not know how many times he died. In the end, he was almost numb, completely unconscious. Was this the end? He fell into a deep sleep as if he had been freed. In the final moment, he seemed to turn around and look at the source of all the illusions, finally seeing the essence of those deaths. Those deaths seemed to have become pitch-black pages that fluttered in the wind. Countless dancing black pages overlapped with each other like snow. They converged into a sea of sorrow and despair, outlining a silent world. Perhaps that was the true appearance of the Book of Destiny. An icy world where one died in solitude. The room returned to silence. The only sound that could be heard was the sound of the branches continuously writing on the Book of Destiny. The illusory crow quietly stared at Huaishi. Through his body, she seemed to be able to see the origin substance burning vigorously. Even though it was just a person's consciousness, when their thoughts rubbed against each other, the sparks that flew out were as dazzling as flames. The crow glanced at the Book of Destiny and couldn't help but sigh. As expected, if it weren't for it constantly extracting origin substance, you would have awakened many years ago. Ever since she had awakened from the Book of Destiny, she had been constantly observing Huaishi. As such, she was able to conclude from various signs that Huaishi had most likely taken a step into the Ascended Realm a long time ago. Otherwise, a normal person probably wouldn't have been recognized by the Book of Destiny as a wielder, and she wouldn't have placed her bets so easily. Right now, on the title page, next to Huaishi's name, the words "emergency period" in brackets grew heavier and heavier, as if they were accumulating energy in an attempt to change. However, Every time they tried to change, it seemed to encounter an invisible resistance and return to its original position. Very quickly, the invisible force pulled the quill to a blank space on the first page of the Book of Destiny, drawing out a curved line. As time flowed on, the arc slowly grew larger and larger, gradually becoming a perfect circle. However, the final gap couldn't be closed no matter how hard she tried. It's still a bit off? The crow muttered in astonishment. Normally speaking, the emergency period was when a person's innate nature broke free from the silver sea and the origin substance became independent, gradually returning to their consciousness. During this process, an ascended person's unique soul would be forged. This period was usually very short and was different from the structure of the soul. The shortest record in history was only 5 minutes and 12 seconds, while the longest time was only 5 or 6 months. Even the crow had never seen a person who hadn't passed the emergency period after 6 or 7 years. Even if he had been in a state of empty mana for a long time because of the Book of Destiny, wasn't this a bit too exaggerated? Originally, she had thought that with the impact of the deaths recorded in the Book of Destiny, Huaishir would be able to smoothly break through the bottleneck in a few minutes. However, she hadn't expected that this guy was already standing at the door, but he just wouldn't go in. The forging of the soul was just a bit off. Just a bit. What exactly is it that's missing? The crow couldn't help but narrow her eyes. She had overlooked something important in the end. This feeling was very unpleasant, but no matter how much she thought about it, she couldn't understand why. The existence of the soul was the sublimation of one's innate nature and consciousness, and it contained the essence of human nature. It was because everyone was different that there were so many different souls in the world. There could only be one reason why the construction process had come to a standstill: Huaishir himself. But even if she wanted to search for Huaishir's records, she could only read up to the time after Huaishir had picked up the Book of Destiny when he was 10 years old. After that, there was only a blank space, but through the description between the lines, she could clearly see that Huaishir was trying to hide something. But she couldn't tell what it was. Huaishir wouldn't say anything, so this could only remain an eternal secret. Just as the crow was deep in thought, the incomplete circle began to change once again. Black ink began to appear, and as the arc changed, it formed the outline of a waning moon. It's actually the phase of the moon? The crow was stunned for a moment before she sighed with emotion. How rare. Although the construction of the soul wasn't complete, its attributes had already appeared. In the classification of the Book of Destiny, the phase of the moon corresponded to a person's origin substance, which was the soul itself. Most of the soul's abilities under the phase of the moon were related to interference with the soul, such as mind control, consciousness modification, and spiritual recovery. This branch was a strange and mysterious symbol for most people who had ascended. Unfortunately, the scope is too small. The crow shook her head with slight disdain. Too small. Relying on strangeness and fear might allow one to achieve a certain level of success, but the true center of the world stage would never be left to those who only knew how to hide in the dark. After an unknown amount of time, Huaishir's breathing became heavy. His eyelids fluttered, as if he was about to wake up from a dream. She sighed, and the branch of the matter slowly rose, gently touching the center of the full moon, leaving behind a bit of ink. The crow's color became paler and paler. "I've given you a chance, Huaishir," she whispered. She murmured softly, "It's up to you whether or not you can build a bridge from illusion to reality." "It's done." The confidant rushed into the office excitedly, holding a portable hard drive in his hand. "Master, from the moment that bastard Chun Quan snatched the box, all the surveillance footage along the way are here. Are your hands and feet clean?" The man called Master seemed to have not slept for a long time. His eyes were red, and when he raised his head, his bloodshot eyes looked extremely ferocious. The confidant trembled subconsciously and squeezed out a smile. "Don't worry, I found someone else to do it and didn't leave our names. Even if someone tracks it down, they'll at most find it on him." "Very good." The master took the hard drive and didn't say anything else. He paced back and forth in the office. After a long time, he finally made up his mind and stomped his feet. Go and inform those old men and women that there will be mass on the weekend night. Tell them all to come. Those who don't come don't have to come in the future. The confidant was stunned for a moment. Wasn't it held the day before yesterday? They're used to coming at the end of the month. Then can't you just find an excuse? The master was furious and glared at his face. Do I have to help you think of an excuse? Can it be the Heavenly Father's birthday? Okay. Whatever you say. The confidant didn't dare to be unlucky again. He covered his head and fled. In the quiet office, the slightly prematurely aged middle-aged man was silent for a long time. He closed the door and paced for a long time before plugging in the hard drive and began to read the fragmented information on it. The person in the warehouse suddenly pulled out a gun and killed someone, took the holy object, and then was injured in the counterattack. The explosion happened, and he fled all the way. Finally, he got into a small alley. As the timeline moved forward quickly, the young man with the piano case walked into the box. Soon, he walked out of it, and the picture froze again. His gaze stopped on that slightly immature face. It's you. The master leaned closer to the screen, his scarlet eyes staring at the young man in the picture. Chapter 10. I'm suffering. In the desolate backyard, Huaisher sat on the steps of the garden, looking up at the sky and sighing as he stared blankly at the ground. At this moment, he deeply felt that he was a child with a bitter life. He was tricked by an agent into going to a brothel for an interview, and on the way home, he encountered corpses. He was mysteriously thrown into a police station because of a box, and not even a day after he was released, he was thrown into another police station. Now, in order to survive, he had no choice but to accept the help of a crow. However, this crow's greatest ability was to make him die again and again. In the end, it was all for nothing. Since he was going to die, couldn't he just die once? Why did he have to die dozens of times? He died to the point where he was almost numb. Death premonition, an unprecedented skill, was about to take shape. Huaisher felt that if he was lucky enough to survive this time, he could rely on death to raise this skill to LV10 for the rest of his life. If you have time to complain, you might as well die more. This kind of meditation can at least train your origin substance. Who knows, you might be able to break through the 99% progress bar and become an ascender. Beside him, the crow, who had zebra striped for some reason due to lack of ink, suggested, "As if I believe you." Huaisher completely ignored her. He stared at the desolate garden and began to think, who am I? Where am I? There's only half a month before school starts. I'm so poor that I'm about to die. What am I doing other than seeking death? Suddenly, he raised his eyebrows and an idea came to his mind. I say, do you have any way to make money? I do. The zebra crow carelessly combed its feathers and pointed at the road outside the door. Walk for 10 minutes and take the bus. Turn left at the next stop and you'll be at the bank. Grab a ticket and you'll have everything. Who doesn't know how to rob a bank? Huaisher rolled his eyes. Don't you have any magic that can turn stone into gold? Magic. That's a long story, but I do know the technology to make gold, but what? Huaisher leaned forward, his eyes shining. But the cost per gram is about 3,000 yuan in Dongsha currency. She said calmly, pure gold made this way is usually used as a spiritual base material in all kinds of ceremonies and altars. If you want, I can get you 2 pounds. If I had money, why would I need gold? Huaisher was speechless. He could only sit on the steps and continue to stare blankly until a faint shattering sound rang out, waking him up. It was as if a glass bottle had been kicked and broken. In this hot summer afternoon, it was so crisp. Huaisher turned around in shock and looked in the direction of the front yard. Someone's coming? Crow looked up thoughtfully and said worriedly, did they find out that I stole electricity from your house? Huaisher was stunned at first. Then he came to his senses and glared at him. When the hell did you do such a thing behind my back? Actually, I also secretly pulled out a network cable. The Wi-Fi signal is pretty good. Crow took out a smartphone from under its wing. Do you need a password? Huaisher glared at her and got up. She tiptoed to the back of the room and poked her head out. Crow skillfully stepped on his head and poked his head out as well. In the corner of the decaying courtyard, there was a person looking around sneakily, then reached out and pulled down his companion who had climbed over the wall. Just like that, the two of them landed on the ground. Their arms were bulging, and their faces were still covered by masks. "Oh," Crow whispered, "do people who charge electricity still climb over walls these days?" "Probably thieves." Huaisher gritted his teeth and bent down to pick up half of an iron bar from the corner. "Anyway, this kind of thing has happened more than once." "Oh." She looked at Huaisher thoughtfully and then smiled strangely. "I hope so." Huaisher did not have time to pay attention to her. He lowered his voice and quietly peeped at the scene in front of him. The two burly men put on their gloves, looked around, and whispered something to each other. Then they tiptoed into the house through the broken window on the side. Huaisher carefully opened the back door of the house and heard the old floorboards creaking. The heavy footsteps first lingered in the living room, then went upstairs. The sound of the door being opened could be heard continuously. Soon, he heard voices upstairs. "He's not here. Let's look for him first and see where he hid it." Then there was a rummaging sound, and there was a constant sound of things being broken. Huaisher listened with a toothache. Originally, the house was already barren. His parents had pawned everything that was slightly valuable, and all that was left was a pair of worthless rotten furniture. It was not easy for these guys to survive for so long, but he did not expect to be in trouble today. Fortunately, although the house was barren, at least the house was big enough and there were many empty rooms. It would take a long time even if they searched. Huaisher took a deep breath, grabbed a stick, and tiptoed upstairs. He heard a rough sound coming from his bedroom. Bang! The sound of a drawer falling to the ground. "Damn it, my desk." Then there was another crisp sound, and the things in the cabinet fell to the ground. Crash! The things on the desk lamp and the table also fell down. "Look at this." As if they had found something, Huaisher heard the sound of a zipper being pulled. It was the sound of the piano case being opened, followed by the dull echo of the piano body being hit. "Not in here. Could there be a mezzanine?" One of them guessed. "Break it open and see. F*CK your mother." Huaisher was furious. "I didn't care when you rummaged through the cabinets, and now you want to destroy my rice bowl. This is a big feud." With no time to hesitate, he poked his head out and saw the two people squatting on the ground with their backs to him. One of them had already picked up a hammer. Anger rose in his heart, and he became bold. He raised the stick and jumped down. He had a good plan here. First, he would stun one person, then before the other person could react, he would hit again. Everything was done. Things went very smoothly. Bang! The man with the hammer fell to the ground, but right after that, Huaisher saw the iron pipe in her hand, which had been there for God knows how many years, break in the middle and fly out. He was stunned. The other person was also stunned. Then, a fierce light flashed in his eyes, and he pounced on Huaisher. Huaisher subconsciously raised his leg and kicked him. Then, he staggered, picked up the chair next to him, and threw it down. Then, the broken chair that had been with him for so many years was also sacrificed. That person didn't seem to be in pain or itch. He finally got up from the ground and clenched his fists, making cracking sounds. His face under the mask also became ferocious. Huaisher took a step back at first, but then he reacted. Today was different. He was no longer the weak chicken who couldn't even trust a chicken. "Good, this peerless martial art skill will be displayed in your shop." He smiled coldly and went up to perform a set of military boxing. Then it was another set of military boxing, and finally another set of military boxing. The military boxing that he had learned through getting beaten up was indeed very easy to practice. He went from the first set to the third set without stopping. It was like moving clouds and flowing water, full of vigor and vigor. Except for the fact that the opponent didn't lose a single hair, there were no shortcomings. Huaisher was about to collapse from exhaustion, but he didn't even hit the person. If this was under the bridge, he might have earned 100 or so yuan as a tip, but it was useless now. The brawny man's movements were frighteningly agile. Although he didn't know any military boxing, the strength of his punches and kicks was frightening. With a casual punch, Huaisher's vision turned black, and his face swelled up. Damn, this guy is tough. I'll run. Huaisher just had this thought in his mind, but then he became angry. This is my King house. Even if someone is going to run, it's not me. Then he felt a chill at the back of his head and subconsciously lowered his head. Then he felt a hammer swinging at the back of his head. The wind whistled, and the guy behind Huaisher, who was knocked down by his rod, got up. That was why old steel rods were unreliable. Before Huaisher had time to reflect, he saw the man opposite him pounce on him. With a sudden hug, he was pressed to the ground. Then a big hand grabbed his neck. Kill this little cur. Under the mask, the pair of eyes were full of viciousness. Damn, I almost capsized. The man holding the hammer gasped and walked up. He raised the hammer in his hand and aimed it at Suke's head. Karma really came fast. Just now, Huaisher was the one who hit someone, and now it was someone else's turn to hit him. Seeing that the hammer was being raised, he was so scared that he struggled hard, but he couldn't get rid of the hand on his neck. In the chaos, he could only tear off his mask, revealing his scarred face. CK, help! Huaisher screamed. Think of something sad. Crow shouted at the top of his voice. Think about how you died in your dreams. How many times did you die? How tragically did you die? Huaisher suddenly felt a little tired. He was going to die. What was the use of thinking about that? Oh, and then he wouldn't be afraid if he was mentally prepared, right? He could also die peacefully. What a good idea. Thinking of the tragic deaths in his dreams, Huaisher felt a burst of grief and indignation. After personally experiencing death countless times, the terrifying weight of those memories almost made him breathless. The more he died, the more he was afraid of death, because death was such a terrible thing. At that moment, he felt a warm flow emerge from his right hand, and then there seemed to be something in his clenched fist. It was fine like sand, and it was full of sand. Without time to think, Huaisher subconsciously scattered those things. Pitch-black dust flew from his fingertips, and in an instant, it pounced on the man's face. The hand that was strangling him loosened a little in the sudden attack. Huaisher suddenly opened his eyes, then suddenly rolled over, and heard a roar in his ear. The floor at the back of his head was smashed to pieces by the hammer. The loud noise made him break out in a cold sweat. But then, before he could get up, he saw the face of the person who was strangling him suddenly contorted. His face turned red, and he panted violently. Then he burst into tears. The person holding the hammer was stunned for a moment, and then his eyes turned red. CK. What the hell is this? Chili powder? In his shock, Huaisher accidentally inhaled the black powder floating in the air that was quickly decomposing. Suddenly, a strong sour feeling spread from the tip of his nose. Be careful. That seems to be tribulation dust. You'll be in trouble if you get it on you. Crow's warning was always a step too late, and Huaisher finally realized that the sour feeling at the tip of his nose did not seem to come from external stimulation, but it came from the pain and sadness in the depths of his heart. It seemed like he was fired by a garbage supervisor and lost his job for a living. It seemed like his little Shiba Inu that he raised from childhood was stolen. It seemed like one day he finished his overtime work early and went to his girlfriend's house to find another man lying in her bed. It seemed like a sudden obituary and cancer notice. It was like a useless author who couldn't write for several days, even though he promised to update 2 chapters a day. His lungs were convulsing, his eyes were burning, and the tip of his nose was full of sour feelings. Uncontrollable sadness spread in his heart. He recalled that when he was 3 years old, he fell on the stairs, and when he was 6 years old, his savings of 50 yuan was stolen by a fat kid in the game hall. His unreliable parents went missing after donating money. He met a male prostitute in an interview, and he was inexplicably involved in this kind of thing when he returned home. God, I'm so miserable. Huaisher looked up to the sky, and a sad scream came from his throat. He began to cry loudly, and his tears could not stop flowing. Chapter 11. Oh God, I'm so bitter. Huaishir raised her head to the sky and let out a mournful scream. Then she began to bawl loudly as tears streamed down her face uncontrollably. At the same time, two horse wails rang out, unwilling to be outdone. One air, Dad is sorry. Mom, your son is unfilial. I can't send you off. Under the terrifying effect of the tear gas, the two burly men who broke into the house cried until their snot and tears were about to flow out. While crying, the three of them looked at each other, as if they felt that the world was so cruel, but they were so lonely. At this moment, they couldn't help but feel a sense of sympathy for each other. No way. Even if their mother died, they lost their daughter, and they were unlucky for the rest of their lives. They still had to do the work they needed to do, and they still hadn't finished what they needed to do. After wiping away their tears and snot, the two burly men suddenly pounced on them, and the three of them wrestled together. Like chickens pecking at each other, they cried, pulled each other's hair, slapped each other, kicked each other's lower body, and broke each other's pinky fingers. As they cried, Huaishir really began to cry. It was too F***king painful. Mother F***er, be gentler. He cried and gave the man a punch, covering his eyes. The scarred face with tears also lifted up and suddenly bit Huaishir's arm. The other man took the opportunity to grab Huaishir's hair, crying and punching him mindlessly. Old Six, kill him. The man who was being beaten up by Huaishir screamed between crying and gasping for breath. Kill him. Old Six behind Huaishir cried and responded, then immediately punched the back of Huaishir's head with all his strength, causing him to black out and fall to the ground. Ai Ching leaned against the wall with one hand on her crutch, the dust on the handrail and the wall rubbed gray marks on her white dress. In her other hand, she held a gun. Smoke faintly rose from the muzzle. You took the bait so quickly. She looked at the struggling man under Huaishir and then stepped aside at the entrance of the stairs. Keep him alive. At the bottom of the stairs behind her, Yu Dongri walked up with a complicated expression. He took a deep look at Ai Ching next to him and couldn't help but feel a chill in the back of his molars. He didn't expect that Huaishir had the confidence of Ai Ching. On the way here with Ai Ching, he finally figured out what was going on. Everyone thought that after attacking the police station, the culprit would disappear with the border relics and lay low for a while. But Ai Ching had a different opinion in her heart. The evidence was based on the newly discovered corpses from yesterday morning. Although they were equally tragic, there were traces of torture and abuse on them. They suffered a great deal of pain before they died. Under the cover of so many tragic deaths, this clue was passed over by most people. But looking at the other corpses, it could be seen that although the murderer's killing method was cruel, it was clean and neat, and he didn't waste time on irrelevant matters. Even if he had a strong desire for sadism, he wouldn't waste time in such a place. Sublimators weren't invincible, especially in such a harsh shelter like the present. Even if he had a high-level stigmata, he couldn't do whatever he wanted. If he left a clue and attracted the attention of the astronomical society, he would never have a good ending. But since he had already found what he wanted, why bother torturing others? Was there not enough corpses? Internal cleansing? Eliminating dissidents? Accountability? Or were they two completely unrelated cases? Then, among the countless guesses, there might be a possibility that was close to the truth. They hadn't found what they wanted. In addition to the border relics in the box, they also lost something else. Therefore, even if they found the box, they would never give up. If so, then there might be one person among their next targets. The person who reported the case first found the box. Why sure? She only had such a useless card in her hand. How dare this woman play such a big card and call Shohan in front of everyone? What was more frightening was that she really played this card. Originally, Yu Dongri thought that Huaishir was let off lightly because Ai Ching was lenient for the sake of her childhood sweetheart. Now it seemed that this woman really had no humanity at all. And thinking that his weakness was in the hands of such a person, Yu Dongri's heart became more and more cold. Now that Ai Ching had given the order, he didn't dare to find an excuse to slack off. He could only sigh, lift his hair, and raise his eyes to look at the two people who were crying and wrestling on the floor in front of him. Ward round. Take out your ID card. As early as when he began to act coquettishly, Huaishir had a bad feeling in his heart. At this moment, he was using the same trick again. There was no way he would fall for it. He immediately turned his head, and his eyes were as tight as possible. Even if he was beaten to death, he didn't want to be embarrassed like last time. And the man who didn't know anything about this raised his head in shock and looked over. In the darkness, with his eyes tightly closed, Huaishir actually heard a strange ho-ho sound, and the force that was pulling him suddenly loosened. The man seemed to be rolling on the ground. In a daze, Huaishir quietly opened his eyes and looked at the man on the ground. He only saw him staring blankly in the direction of the stairs behind Huaishir, as if he couldn't breathe and kept scratching his throat. His face was blue and purple, but there was no despair in his expression. Instead, it was full of surprise and admiration. Oh my God, what kind of godly skill is this? Huaishir's heart was completely cold. He didn't dare to look back and closed his eyes even tighter, until the man fell to the ground with a thud and fainted. Yu Dongri came up and picked the man up. He found a chair and tied him up. Huaishir kept his eyes closed. It wasn't until he was finally sure that he was safe that he breathed a sigh of relief. Although the guy in front of him was uninvited like the two bandits, he still politely expressed his gratitude. Finally, he looked at Ai Qing, who had just brazenly shot to save his life, only to find that the way she looked at him was a little strange. In a daze, he heard Ai Qing sigh. Huaishir, long time no see. Huaishir was stunned for a long time. He couldn't help but scratch his head and ask awkwardly, "Sorry, who are you?" In the long silence, Yu Dongri couldn't hold it in anymore. He turned his head and laughed out loud. Ai Qing was still expressionless, but her finger pulled the trigger of the pistol again. "Oh, long time no see." Under the terrible pressure of the premonition of death, Huaishir quickly patted his head and acted as if he suddenly realized something. "Look at my memory. I remember now." "Oh." Ai Qing raised her eyebrows slightly and raised the muzzle an inch. "Then tell me, who am I? Aren't you that?" Huaishir was so scared that his face turned green. He racked his brains and couldn't remember where he had seen such a beautiful big sister with a walking stick. Ai Qing seemed to be too lazy to care about him. She walked past him with her walking stick and directed Yu Dongri to lift the guy on the chair and find a bigger place to put him down. She splashed a basin of water over him and woke him up from his coma. "My floor." Huaishir's eyes twitched when he saw the wet patch on the floor. He wisely didn't say anything. Forget about it. He didn't need to care about what kind of deities these two were. The sooner he finished, the sooner he could leave. As long as they didn't kill anyone in his home again, it would be fine. And just when he needed her the most, that ghost-seeing crow had disappeared without a trace. The person opened his eyes and saw Yu Dongri in front of him. Yu Dongri had already pulled out his hair and was staring into the person's eyes. He activated his strange ability in the blink of an eye. The person seemed to be in a daze. He kept saying "Ohs" at Yu Dongri, saliva dripping from his mouth. However, Yu Dongri's expression suddenly became disappointed, as if he had discovered something. No, he doesn't have any more origin substance left. He turned around to look at Ai Qing and shook his head. This person's brain has probably been damaged for a long time. He's a completely drained corpse. There's no way to get anything out of him. Ai Qing's expression also darkened. "Ask first." After a long time, she said, "If you can't get anything out of him, then we'll talk." Yu Dongri nodded helplessly. He turned around and asked, "Name?" "Zhao Baozhu." The person laughed foolishly as he stared at Yu Dongri. "Youngster, why are you so handsome? I really like you." As he spoke, white foam began to seep out of his mouth. He began to tremble violently. The chair that he was tied to began to creak sharply, as if the ropes were about to snap. Yu Dongri's expression changed. Immediately afterwards, everyone could hear a crisp sound coming from within his body. Crack, crack, crack. It sounded like the strings of a zither being snapped. However, Zhao Baozhu's expression only grew more and more excited. I'm going to ascend to the heavens." He grinned and laughed loudly. Heavenly Father has come to pick me up. There are 72 angels who are just as handsome as you. Coming to pick me up. In the midst of his hoarse cries, the person began to convulse violently. Green smoke began to emerge from his mouth and nose. Immediately afterwards, a raging fire quickly emerged, burning through his flesh and bones. It burned vigorously. In the blink of an eye, his entire body was incinerated. He turned into a pile of ash mixed with bone fragments. However, the ropes and chair that bound him were unharmed. There were only dark scorch marks on them. Huaisher took a step back subconsciously. He was so frightened by this scene that his scalp went numb. Yu Dongri rubbed his face. He couldn't help but shake his head and sigh. The trail is broken again. However, Ai Qing's expression remained indifferent. After a long time, she finally spoke after a period of silence. Not necessarily. Yu Dongri was puzzled. However, he noticed that Ai Qing was looking at Huaisher. He's still alive. Ai Qing looked at the stunned Huaisher. Although I don't know why those people wanted to kill him, as long as this bait is here, I can always catch their traces. You want me to die? At this point, how could Huaisher not understand what she was planning? He immediately became furious. There's only half a month left until the summer vacation. I still need 4,000 yuan for my living expenses. I'm going to die either way. I might as well die of poverty. Is that so? Ai Qing interrupted him. She raised the thing in her hand and showed him the black barrel of the gun. Oh, is this all you've got? Although Huaisher was so scared that he desperately leaned back, he was still stubborn. Even if I, Huaisher, am shot to death by you today and jump down from here, I will never. Just as he was about to express his unyielding might, he saw Ai Qing raise another thing. It was her mobile phone. On the screen, the bank balance showed a long string of zeros that Huaisher couldn't count. Everyone for me. I'll do it for everyone. Huaisher patted his chest and said seriously and righteously, "It's the duty of every citizen of Dongxia to cooperate with the investigation of the government. Please don't pity me because I'm a delicate flower. Come on, Diwali, what do you like to play?" Chapter 12. Huaisher never dreamed that before he reached the pinnacle of his life, he would one day receive the same treatment as the campus belle and be accompanied by a legendary bodyguard. Unfortunately, in addition to being a cowherd, this bodyguard had more than one flaw. Without waiting for Huaisher to object, Ai Qing arranged everything neatly and quickly assigned a 24-hour bodyguard to Huaisher, the unlucky guy Yu Dongri. When Ai Qing was here, he didn't dare to be presumptuous. After she left, Yu Dongri began to wander around the Chalcedony Hall. It's so shabby. This house is a pity. The taste is obviously not bad. Where's my room? Huaisher rolled his eyes. There are plenty of empty rooms. There are also beds in the utility room. Take whichever you like. What do you want to eat? I haven't had lunch yet. Do you want boiled vermicelli? Where's the bathroom? He took out a bunch of bottles and jars and said worriedly, I need to replenish my water. The ultraviolet rays have been too strong recently. If you don't have the habit of walking 4 steps backward in the bathroom, it's around the corner. By the way, there's no water heater. You need to make your own. The firewood is in the backyard. Tisk, Yu Dongri sighed unhappily. He didn't know if it was because he couldn't walk 4 steps backward or because he couldn't take a shower freely. After he had walked around the entire house, dissing every nook and cranny of Huaisher's house, the front yard, the backyard, the living room, the balcony, the bathroom, he finally remembered. He took out his phone and asked, Hey, what's the Wi-Fi? No. After being defeated by Ai Qing, Huaisher wasn't in a good mood. He also didn't like the cowherd. Are you here to be a bodyguard or a boss? Nonsense, of course I'm here to be a boss. Yu Dongri snorted and went out with his hands behind his back. After a while, he came back with a huge black plastic bag. Where's the shovel? Huaisher looked at the plastic bag that was trapped in a human shape and felt a chill run down his spine. What are you doing? To bury the body. Yu Dongri asked. Don't tell me you like to put this thing in the corridor. Where do you plan to bury it? Huaisher became vigilant. Yu Dongri didn't say anything. He looked outside the window. Huaisher suddenly jumped up anxiously. No. Are you burying a corpse in your garden? How embarrassing. Then where should we bury them? There's a lot of empty space on a mountain behind the back door. Bury it as far as you can. Fisk, how troublesome. Although Udongri was lazy, he did not object. He carried the body and shovel and left. Huaisher heaved a sigh of relief after seeing him leave. He finally left. The crow appeared out of nowhere. I had to hide for half a day. Huaisher became even angrier when he saw the ghost bird slacking off. Where did you go just now? I was cleaning up your mess. If it weren't for that little girl's sharp eyes, how could she have been fine after you scattered the ashes? The crow rolled his eyes. Huaisher became even angrier when he heard this. What the hell is that thing? How did it get out of my hands? He had originally thought that he would awaken some kind of miraculous power when he was on the verge of death, but what he had awakened was a miraculous chili powder. Who could withstand that? How should I put it? By definition, it's a rare origin substance material. It's a high-purity essence extracted from large amounts of death and destruction. The crow pondered for a moment before replying. If you want me to explain how you were able to scatter this stuff, then it's probably because you read death records and used your own unique attribute to extract your fear of death. Then you added it to your own origin substance and synthesized it into high-purity calamity ash. However, this is not your soul's ability. It's a byproduct of your subconscious use of your own attribute. For example, it's probably the noise of a washing machine, the wastewater from an air conditioner, or the radiation from an induction cooker. Can't you use a different adjective? Fine, then let's put it this way. Right now, you're probably a negative energy generator. It doesn't matter if you don't add the word probably. Huaisher was furious. He glared at him hatefully. Also, what kind of skill is this? Can't you help me get a better one? I want to, but... The crow shrugged. You know what walls can't be painted means, right? Huaisher glared at him hatefully for a long time. Then, he quickly reacted. If that's the case, negative emotions can be extracted, then positive emotions can't be extracted, right? In other words, I can make fat otaku happy ashes any time? Oh, you mean dust of the liberated? The crow nodded. That's right. However, the problem is you have to have some happy memories, right? Bullshit. How can there be no happy memories? I'm so happy. Huaisher angrily slapped his chest. Do you know how happy my days were? I was happy from morning to night. When I woke up, I could continue to be happy. The crow didn't say anything. He just looked at him until Huaisher awkwardly turned his head away. Let's change the topic. Just like that. Under the cruel reality, he accepted the fact that he had become a negative energy generator. Since someone is here, I'm afraid I have to hide for a while for safety reasons. I'm afraid you'll have to rely on yourself for what to do next. The crow heard footsteps coming from the back door and hurriedly said, in order to avoid being exposed, don't read the death records in the Book of Destiny when there are people around. Try meditating on your own. Meditating? Huaisher was stunned. How do I meditate? How do I meditate? Didn't I give you the Wi-Fi password? The crow unfolded his wings and flew into the distance, leaving only his last words. Check it out yourself. After a busy afternoon, he finally managed to deal with Udongri's various strange needs. In the midst of all this, Huaisher even secretly used her phone to look up what meditation was. It took him 3 to 4 hours to flip through 100,000 advertisements and various strange religious propaganda materials. Finally, he found a relatively reliable explanation in a foreign encyclopedia. In layman's terms, there are many types of meditation. The more advanced methods were very complicated. First, find a quiet place, preferably with a cool breeze, a bright moon hanging high in the sky, a bamboo forest, or by a river. Then take a bath and change clothes, fast for 3 days, burn incense, and so on. But if it was a lower level meditation, it was extremely simple. Find a comfortable place to lie down, close your eyes, and empty your mind. Although it sounded a little ridiculous, at least there wouldn't be any problems with this method. At most, you would just accidentally fall asleep. If he blindly came up with some strange method, endocrine imbalance would be the least of it, but he would be on the road to schizophrenia. In a website cited in the encyclopedia, Huisher saw a summary of the nature of meditation in a British metaphysics nerd's blog. After leaving the background of mysticism, for ordinary people, meditation was a way to relax the nerves in the brain. By emptying one's mind and entering a deep dormant state, one would allow the overloaded internal organs and nervous system to have space to rest and repair themselves. Therefore, it wasn't limited to meditation, penance, chanting sutras, or taking drugs. As long as one could enter a state of relaxation and emptiness, one could do anything. The blogger also recommended the methods he had personally tried at his blog and listed out the pros and cons, including writing. The cons were that it was easy to enter a state of anxiety after getting stuck. If someone found out that you had used your name as the main character to write "Goblins are not fish in the pool," you would welcome social death from its rapid spread. Playing the piano. The cons were that it was difficult to get started and it was easy to disturb people. The blogger chose to give up after being beaten up by his neighbor for the third time. Finally, the blogger came to a conclusion. Painting was still better. In his last blog post, he mentioned that not only did he empty himself and enter a state of meditation, but he also heard the whispers of ancient souls that had returned from the seventh dimension in his ears and dreams, narrating the truth of all living things. This allowed him to gain enlightenment and liberation. At the end of the post, he also posted his latest work after his painting skills had improved by leaps and bounds. Huisher tried his best to lean back so that the exquisite work of art, which seemed to be a mixture of dried sheep's blood, broken internal organs, and large eyeballs, could be further away from him. "Big brother, are you okay?" Before turning off his phone, he took a look. This brother's last blog post was from 2 years ago. Furthermore, the address he left in his blog was a city the Huisher had never heard of before. It was called Manchester, and it couldn't be found on any mapping software. Perhaps this blog post was just a joke, right? After turning off his phone, Huisher faced his cello and had a bold idea. In any case, as long as he emptied himself, it should be fine, right? He didn't know how to write novels, nor did he know how to draw. Although he knew how to play the piano a little, it wasn't good enough for the stage. Playing the cello shouldn't be a problem, right? He was eager to give it a try for a long time. First, he went to boil water, took a bath, and changed into a more serious performance outfit. Then, he pretended to calm his mind for a long time before picking up the bow under Yu Dongri's excited gaze. Do you know how to play Pomp and Circumstance? Yu Dongri, who was eating melon seeds, wanted to choose a song. Peach Blossom Love Song or Elysium Bliss is also fine. Get lost. Huisher rolled his eyes. When he heard Pomp and Circumstance, he thought this guy was going to play. He didn't expect him to have a completely different idea. Just one Bach. If you want to listen, then get lost. After saying that, Huisher ignored him, lowered his eyes, and pulled the bow. However, after he played the first note, his movements suddenly stopped. He froze in place. The low sound of the strings still lingered in the air, slowly reverberating and dispersing, but it sounded different from before. It should be said that the feeling was completely different. It wasn't a matter of feeling or rhythm, but a certain kind of layering that was completely different from the past. It was as if he had suddenly changed into a different person. No, it would be more appropriate to say that he had changed into a different instrument. Huisher had never been able to imagine that he could play such warm and soothing notes from this old instrument under his own hands. It was as if the thin sound was also endowed with a vigorous texture. He could feel it flowing. When he pulled the strings again, the vigorous and light melody, as if it had been endowed with life, gushed out from the strings like flowing water. It was as if it was an extension of his will and body. His whole person was detached from his small body, sublimated, turned into heavy light and rain, and spread around. Riding on the melody, it reverberated in the empty hall. In the past, his teacher had repeatedly explained the vague feelings that he had difficulty understanding. At this moment, he suddenly realized that it was so simple. The abundant emotions that emerged from the bottom of his heart, for some reason, merged into the low melody with the movements of his fingers and the strings. like a river rushing into a surging sea. It shook his consciousness and carried him to a distant place. Oh my God, have I leveled up? There was no time to click his tongue and be excited. Huaisher didn't even have the time to feel joy and excitement. He had been attracted by his own melody and involuntarily became intoxicated in the sad and low sound of the instrument. He seemed to have fallen asleep again. But in the dream, there was no death and fear that had been entangling him. In the silent darkness, he felt as if he was sinking in water, full of silence and serenity. When he tried to open his eyes, it was a blur in front of him. He couldn't see clearly. He could only vaguely glimpse the light in the distance, with ripples like a tide. And when he tried to move his hands and feet, the darkness seemed to break open, and he returned to the empty hall. He was suspended in the air. When Huaisher lowered his head, he saw himself playing in a trance. It was as if his whole person had been divided into two. One was his physical self intoxicated in the performance, but the spiritual self seemed to ride the melody, breaking free from the shackles of the body and flying in the air. Suddenly, he discovered that Yu Dongri had left the hall at some point. He curiously wandered around and discovered that he could actually pass through the walls like a ghost. He could move freely, but he couldn't leave the stone essence building's surroundings. It was as if he had been imprisoned in the middle of an invisible wall. This is a form of protection, Huaisher. Don't misunderstand. The illusory crow stood on a branch outside the wall and looked at him, as if she could see through his thoughts. Separating origin substances is an extremely dangerous activity. If you didn't have the stone essence building's protection, you would probably be like a candle in the darkness right now, being targeted by something. As she spoke, she flapped her wings, pushing Huaisher back down the wall. A friendly reminder: before you reach the peak of the Mercury rank, don't try this anywhere else. It was as if he were drunk or dreaming. Huaisher didn't even hear what she was saying. He floated around like a leaf, swaying as he wandered around the stone essence building. Soon, he found the sneaky Yu Dongri in the washroom on the third floor. Taking advantage of the fact that Huaisher wasn't paying attention while playing the zither, he secretly ran to the washroom on the third floor. He locked the door and carefully looked around. After making sure that no one was paying attention, he reached out and took out a bottle from his bag. Huaisher's heart suddenly jumped. What was he trying to do? Just as Huaisher curiously poked half her head out of the wall to see what this guy was up to, she saw him sigh and take off his long hair that was dyed with a few strands of golden hair from his head. Take it off. Huaisher's eyes widened in shock. What the hell? He only saw Yu Dongri turn on his phone's flashlight and use the mirror to illuminate his bald head. His expression became sorrowful. I lost two more. Every time I use my ability, I lose them. That woman is very bad. Holding the two strands of fine fur, Lu Dongli's tears almost flowed out. After berating the heartless AI Qing for a long time, he sighed and dug out a little ointment from the bottle. He spread it evenly on his scalp. Then, when he heard Huaisher finish playing the zither, he quickly put on his wig and left in a hurry. Huaisher, who was speechless, was also pulled back into his body by an invisible force when the zither music ended. He opened his eyes and saw Yu Dongri, who was still in his original position, praising and applauding as if he hadn't been anywhere. Well played, Yu Dongri seriously pointed out, but there's still room for improvement. He didn't know why, but he felt that Huaisher suddenly looked at him with pity. All in all, it was a quiet night. The next day, before dawn, Huaisher was awakened by Yu Dongri's rude knocking on the door. After a long absence of normal sleep, he sleepily yawned and opened the door. Then, he saw Yu Dongri with two dark circles under his eyes. His eyes were bloodshot. What's wrong with you? He was stunned. Why do you look like you saw a ghost? What do you think? Yu Dongri looked at him bitterly. What's wrong with your house? What do you mean what's wrong? Isn't it just a little broken and old? Huaisher leaned back a little in disgust. Why are you city people so delicate? Delicate my ass? If it's a little broken and old, I'll just treat it as camping. But you didn't say your house was a haunted house. Yu Dongri's expression became more and more indignant. Since the early hours of the morning, there's been the sound of water dripping in the toilet next door. The floor in the corridor is always creaking, and there's also the sound of footsteps. I heard it loud and clear. Aren't all old houses like this? Huaishir casually picked up the washing cup and walked downstairs. He calmly asked, "Haven't you seen old facilities before? Why are you sighing in an empty room when your facilities are old?" Yu Dongri was so angry that he stomped his feet. "Is your house haunted?" Huaishir was silent for a moment. He looked at him with more and more pity. After a long time, he gently patted him on the shoulder. "Old Lu, you must be tired, right? Don't be afraid. There are no ghosts in this world." It was not until Huaishir had left for a long time that Lu Dongli, who was still in a daze, finally came to his senses. He was so angry that he wanted to jump up and beat Huaishir's whole family several times. "I'll accept it if you don't call me Big Bro, but what the hell is old Lu? I'm old enough to be your uncle." Chapter 13. The office of the Special Affairs Department was completely silent. "That's it." A.I. Ching looked at the sweating man behind the desk. "Two perfectly fine people, and you're telling me that they're gone? There's nothing we can do about it. We only managed to get a few side views from the surveillance cameras. They were both wearing masks, so we couldn't tell where they came from. As for this picture," the man looked at the picture of the prisoner tied to the chair on the desk, and his headache worsened. He pointed at the bridge of his nose and cheekbones and said, "There are obvious signs of plastic surgery here, and it hasn't been that long. It won't be easy to find them. If there were so many easy things in the world, there would be peace a long time ago." A.I. Ching wasn't interested in this sort of brainless excuse. She pointed at the white powder in the plastic bag on the desk. "What about this thing? Are there any new clues?" The man looked like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. "Is that so?" A.I. Ching seemed disappointed. "If Xinhai's ability is not enough, then I can only report it to the Astronomy Society. However, if the lid was lifted and something bad happened, then it really wouldn't be good." Cough, cough, cough. "No, that's not what I meant." The unlucky man, who had obviously been pushed out to take the blame, hurriedly waved his hands. He didn't dare wait for the right price. "It's not that we don't want to cooperate, but this kind of unconventional hallucinogenic drug mixed with origin substances is too common. We can't find out where it came from." A.I. Ching frowned. "The part of it that affects people mainly comes from the origin substances, but there are too many relics from the borderlands that can create this kind of thing, and it's too easy to change the composition. Just based on the records alone, there are dozens of them that have been circulating on the market. If we could check the Astronomy Society's database of banned drugs, there might be tens of thousands of them. At the end of the day, the abilities of the Ascended and the products of Hell are too illogical. We really can't do anything about it." The man who was wiping his sweat had already admitted defeat. "Since you don't have the ability, why do you have to be such a burden?" A.I. Ching looked away in disappointment and prepared to leave. The man heaved a sigh of relief. But after pushing open the door, A.I. Ching turned her head and suddenly asked, "Since there are so many things you can't do, you won't refuse when I need your help, right?" "Right, that's right." The man behind the table was stunned for a long time, and he couldn't help but curse those good-for-nothings in his heart. After secretly recording a big score, he reluctantly squeezed out a smile and said, "We will definitely do our best to cooperate." "That's great." The door closed. Music. In the dimly lit private room, two figures were snuggling on the sofa, whispering sweet nothings to each other. One of them raised his hand and snapped his fingers. So, in the corner, the expressionless Huaishir numbly played the violin. In his backpack, he emotionlessly wrote a record in the Book of Destiny. "On the first day I worked with Yu Dongri, he made me play the violin for him. I'll remember this grudge." That's right, this was Huaishir's first day as a part-time gigolo. In order to survive, he degenerated from an elegant cello player to Yu Dongri's dedicated BGM player. The duo debuted together. One sold his body, the other sold his art. With 3 curls and a V-neck jacket, it was only a matter of time before he became a gigolo superstar. No way. Everyone else was a personal bodyguard. Why was it that when it came to him, it became his personal bodyguard? Sleeping in the same room was fine, but even going to work together, was this necessary? If it wasn't for the danger to his life, and AI Ching's 800 yuan per day employment fee, he would have already quit. Now, before this matter was resolved, he was probably tied to this gigolo. Huaishi's requirements weren't high. I'll take the blame. You go die. When this matter was resolved, everyone would go their separate ways. They would tacitly act as if nothing had happened and not be involved in anything for the rest of their lives. This was the best. After he sent that stupid crow away, he would be able to start his life anew. He would rely on his newly activated golden finger to reach the pinnacle of his life, marry a rich and beautiful woman, and fulfill his wish of counting money until he broke dozens of money-printing machines. He would be so famous that he would be able to enter the card pool as a beautiful girl after he died. Just as he was fantasizing, his sensitive hearing suddenly heard a suppressed cry from the sofa. Amidst the alcohol and the sorrowful cello sound, the woman in Yu Dongri's arms couldn't hold back the sadness in her heart. She choked out and held Yu Dongri's hand. In my heart, I've always treated you as my son. I'm sorry, I've always hidden it from you. If my son was still alive, he would definitely be as old as you. In Huaishi's faint snort, Yu Dongri's businesslike smile also became stiff. Finally, after he sent the client away, he came back to see Huaishi's mocking expression. Huaishi looked at him and sighed from the bottom of his heart. Is this the legendary enlightening smell of a gigolo? Enlightening my ass. Yu Dongri rolled his eyes. The smell of heather flowers is more like it. I've slept with her so many times, and I've become a son. TSK. Shouldn't you express your opinion that you're just comforting lonely women and bringing them warmth or something? Then I can also change my view of the gigolo profession. I suspect you have a problem here. Yu Dongri squinted at him and pointed to his head. No matter how well you say it, gigolos are only responsible for selling smiles and bodies. How can there be so many high-end things? But I see that you're making him very happy. Huaishi was stunned for a moment and looked at him with pity again. Don't tell me you like old aunties. Nonsense. Yu Dongri looked at him contemptuously. Do you think everyone is as poor as you are? Back then, with this face of mine, I could make as much money as I wanted. In a few days, I made 40 million. Huaishi was still calm. Oh, and then I was caught. Yu Dongri said dryly. I was caught by that woman herself. Later, she said that if you like to use your face to cheat money from women, you might as well be a gigolo. When you pay off the money I cheated, you'll be free. Huaishi was stunned. Then you really have to be a gigolo? What else? Be sent to the border? My ability doesn't work on things other than humans. If I go there, I'll die. Yu Dongri smoked gloomily. The gun is already in your mouth. Why don't you try shaking your head? You're about to pee your pants. Hearing this, Huaishi was very curious. He leaned forward and whispered, Didn't you use your ability at that time? Yu Dongri's expression became more and more dispirited. After a long time, he squeezed out a few words from his mouth. I used it. It didn't work. Then did you use it or not? I used it, but it didn't work at all. Yu Dongri shook his head in frustration. Later, I kept thinking my ability worked. I even used 10 times the amount in order to escape. Why use my ability? She should have fallen madly in love with me. It's ridiculous, isn't it? Her name is AI Ching, but in the end, love is worthless to her. Huaishi compared it to the woman he met a few days ago and was shocked. Are you really describing a human and not Iron Godzilla? Finally, Yu Dongri looked at him like he was looking at an idiot. You're kidding, right? She's the head of the astronomy club in Xian High, an inspector who has the power to make all the ascendants work for her. How can Godzilla compare to her? If you offend Godzilla, you'll just die a horrible death, but if you offend her, you'll suffer a fate worse than death. Just as the two were talking, they had already left the club's back door and were walking down the street, looking for a place to eat dinner. Yu Dongri was treating. He couldn't stand Huaishi's noodles anymore. If I don't eat some meat, my abs will digest by themselves. Yu Dongri patted his stomach. How about a hot pot? Huaishi glanced at him and said darkly, I heard that eating too much hot pot makes your butt hurt. Yu Dongri was stunned, then realized that this little B***** starred words had a hidden meaning. He couldn't help but raise his leg and give this B asterisk start a good kick. In the end, he couldn't stand it anymore and went home after eating a bowl of noodles. Yu Dongri was still tired from walking and said that he would drive the car over tomorrow. I say, it's already midnight. Huaisher walked on the road and couldn't help but yawn. Can't you get off work earlier? Brother, I'm 17 this year. I'm still growing. Is that so? I think you're almost there. Where else do you plan to grow? Yu Dongri snorted. Plus, what kind of male prostitute works during the day? Because of you, I missed work for the rest of the night. As he said that, he rubbed his fingers and asked Huaisher to think about how much he could earn at night. Huaisher's expression suddenly became strange. He looked back at him for a long time and suddenly asked, "Does this count as me advising you to turn over a new leaf?" Get lost. Just as he was farting on the road, Huaisher heard the sound of a bird flapping its wings. A black crow landed on a tree in front of him and looked back at him. For some reason, Huaisher suddenly felt a chill. Under the crow's hint, he suddenly turned his head and looked behind him. At the end of the quiet street in the suburbs, under the dim light of the street lamps, there was a stooped shadow silently crouching on top of a fire hydrant. The slightly comical mask of the ape slowly raised its head. It stared at them with indifferent eyes. Finally, it's here. Almost in an instant, Yu Dongri reacted. His left hand blocked Huaisher behind him and stuffed his handbag into his arms. His right hand reached into his arms and grasped the weapon in the holster. He quickly retreated. At the same time, the sharp sound of metal rubbing against each other burst out from the feet of the fierce ape. Under the pair of slowly accumulating sharp claws, the fire hydrant was torn apart like a thin piece of paper. As the shadow suddenly jumped up and pounced on them, a violent water column gushed out from the broken fire hydrant. Huaisher staggered back. Looking around in panic, he couldn't help but rejoice in his fear. Fortunately, the guy chose to attack here. If they walked a bit further, there would be no street lamps. In the darkness, Yu Dongri's ability would not have any room to play. Without waiting for him to react, the fierce ape's roar broke through the air, and in a flash, it was already 10 steps away. Yu Dongri was already standing directly under the street lamp. He raised his hand, combed the hair in front of his forehead, and grinned at the fierce ape. In a flash, some power that Huaisher didn't understand was activated. With Yu Dongri's face as a medium, it was reflected in the fierce ape's eyes. In a flash, its movements were stiff, and it fell from the air. It couldn't move. It was even difficult to breathe. Yu Dongri didn't dare to be careless. He raised the gun in his hand, aimed at the ape, and pulled the trigger. In the loud sound, Huaisher suddenly felt darkness in front of him. The street lamps were flickering. He was stunned. He looked back in shock and saw the distribution box next to the fire hydrant already emitting thick smoke. Under the water column's turbulent irrigation, electric sparks and thick smoke crazily spurted out from it. Accompanied by the crazy flickering of the street lamps, there was a loud explosion. The street lamps were completely extinguished. Oh my God, what kind of tofu dregs project was this municipal engineering company doing? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.